Paintbrush Summoner CH 87 to 118. Chapter 87 to 118. The awaited Scarab Guild. After returning from the war and making a full report to Ling, she was quite exasperated. Menu returned to the inn. He meant to sleep no matter what. In the meantime, Ralph and Mofusson traded information. So, the army has not used it yet. Yes. What about you? Toto shook his head. This is not poison, so you cannot make an antidote. Indeed. But do you understand the principle? He nodded. However, he did not look very confident. Understand? Well, I guess. But not really. What did that mean? They wondered, but decided to wait for Menu to wake up. They would eat dinner at the inn that evening. And so after doing some shopping, they returned to find that Menu had finally woken up. Morning. Ah, that smells nice. We have some food. We thought you might be upset if we just left you here. And so we brought you something. They pulled out about 20 sandwiches from a paper bag. People who use a lot of magic energy tend to eat a lot, and so they had guessed that Menu and Cannon would have quite an appetite. And so it was no surprise when the two tore into the bread ravenously. In fact, the others were worried that the two would choke on their food. Some of the bread was filled with sweet and spicy yam beef, as well as spicy vegetables. And the others were filled with fish and mushrooms. Ralph, Toto, Mofusson and Mr. Vala all ate one of each. Stan took a few bites from Toto. In other words, Menu and Cannon ate 6. That was a lot. Woof. Menu and Cannon stretched out with satisfaction. And then he turned back to Toto. Sorry I couldn't talk to you immediately. How were things here? Yes. As this medicine is not poisonous, there is no antidote. However, it has an effect that is similar to your enchantment. I see. So that's why you understand the principle, but do not understand. Magic energy accretion is a field that is still being studied. If it is merely sticking two things together, I and other alchemists can do that. But since the effect disappears with time. It seems close to an enchantment. Menu crossed his arms and thought about it. What is this? It seems like we are close. But I see. Thank you, Toto. I may ask you to do something later. I understand. So it is on hold for now. As Menu could not find a solution, he continued to stare into space and think. Mofusson then made a suggestion. Why not go to the Scarab Guild for a change of pace? Yes, I will go. Menu answered immediately. Apparently, he was very curious about these scarabs that always kicked him. Menu liked new things. I am interested as well. Ralph alone looked like he felt this was all going to lead to something troublesome. However, if the two children were going, then he had no choice but to accompany them. The Scarab Guild was in the Guild District, which was in the center of the town. For this is the Scarab Guild. The first impression they got was that it was flashy. Scarabs with large, bird-like wings were flying all over the place. They had a shiny green and black color with golden edges. It looked quite familiar to Menu. They really were the messengers of the gods. They were currently stuck all over the top of the entrance to the two-story wooden building. Ho ho ho. I suppose it is unusual for foreigners like you. But many villages around here have smaller versions of these. I see. Regardless, Menu was excited to go inside, and he put his hand on the door. Ralph looked more serious and cautious. First it was the forest, then in the large street, and then, ouch. Sorry. Are you all right? Menu looked surprised as he opened the door. But the woman who bumped into him fell to the ground. Her hair went to her shoulders and was tied into 2 ponytails. She was wearing worker clothes and boots. But she also had strong, beautiful features. Are you outsiders? Don't open it so suddenly. You nearly gave me a heart attack, she said in a rather thick accent. Damn it. Never mind that. I better find Bamble and Gain. And then she dashed outside. Menu looked at her back in stunned silence. Ralph realized that he had been right to dread this. Surely this was the start of some trouble. However, if that was the case, he would try and solve it as quickly as possible. Chapter 88, Beloved Ellie. When they entered, a male employee raised his hand to them from behind a counter. There were chairs for people who were waiting, and a row of office desks behind the counter. It looked like some kind of city office. Welcome. If it isn't Mofusson. Ho ho ho. I came to give this man a little tour. He is a traveler from a different country. By the way, Was that? Oh, Ellie? She is one of this town's scarab researchers, but for some reason, there is one that always gets lost. But there was another one that went with it, and so I said that it should be fine. Still, she went to go look for it. Clearly, they were quite advanced in the handling of scarabs in Nedda, Bamble and Gain, was it? So the scarabs gather here? Menu asked with a tilt of his head. The guild worker laughed, seeing that Menu really was an outsider. If you tell them, the scarabs will return here. They are smart, so as long as they are satisfied with the reason, they will obey. On top of that, they will spread the word to the other scarabs. In this country, the scarabs are divided into a day shift and a night shift. And they are managed while they work. You could say they had a deeper cooperative relationship with them compared to other countries. The researchers manage their numbers and health while studying them. For this branch, that is Ellie. It's just about time to let the day workers rest, and send out the night workers, but, as I said before, one of them got lost as usual. So she went out to catch it. Scarabs were like a cheat. So they took good care of them. Also, they were worth more in this country. It will be bad if the sun sets. It might be abducted, after all. Mister, if you have time, could you help us? There is this person who is obsessed with scarabs to the point of giving them all names. This could be dangerous. Abducted? Those bugs that were everywhere. The man seemed to read Menu's mind, as he laughed. It is one of the great problems plaguing this country. The more scarabs there are in the storage space, the more compost. And so smuggling organizations target them. Menu and the others understood now. That is why the scarabs were managed, and why they did not want to lose any. If one got stolen, then it would lead to more thefts. Very well. Mofusen and Toto will go together, while Ralph and I will go on our own, and we will search for it. This way, they would be able to deal with the culprit, if they happen to encounter any. Thank you. Ellie should be near the docks. Very well. Let's go. Menu would go to the docks, Mofusen and Toto to the shopping district, while Ralph would check the back alleys. Apparently, there were only 2 scarabs out right now. So it seemed like it should not be too difficult to find them. However, that was not the case. The town of stone buildings was bathed in red as the sun descended into the sea. While Menu was awed by the beautiful horizon, he shook his head and continued the search. The shore was lined with storage houses, and so Menu went around and looked between them. Occasionally, Alcats would come near him as he looked. But after a short while, I heard the sounds of arguing from between 2 buildings. As I said, I won't give it to you. You too. Menu rushed forwards and saw Ellie and the 2 scarabs. And there were 3 men blocking their path. You, Ellie shouted in surprise when she saw Menu. Obviously, the men turned around. It could not be helped. Menu gave up the hope of an ambush as he slowly walked up to them. However, one of the men grabbed Ellie and stuck a knife to her throat. Hey, mister. Don't you care what happens to her? Menu considered playing dumb, but then he decided to go with a different plan. After standing in Clueview, Menu yawned and then jumped high above their heads, so that he was over the roofs, and then he landed behind the man who had caught Ellie. When one does something that surpasses the imagination of others, they tend to freeze. And he took the opportunity to free Ellie and move her behind his back. Are you alright? He asked Ellie and the scarabs. She was too stunned to answer, but the scarabs stood up on their hind legs and waved their arms. It seemed like they were fine. So, I will be handing you people over to the Knights Guild. TSK. Kill him. Smash his face in. After failing to abduct the scarabs, they were trying to kill the witness. Menu sighed as he raised his staff to block the swinging blade. This will be easier if you're unconscious, he said, not trying to hide how troublesome he felt this was. And then Menu easily pushed away the sword and swung his staff. As he rotated the staff, he made sure to hit the tip against the abductor's head. The man fell, unconscious. And then Menu moved forward before the other 2 could run away. During such times, it was a bad idea to talk to them or leave them conscious. And so Menu held the staff under his arm, and then grabbed the heads of the 2 men, and slammed them together. After making sure that they were unconscious, Menu used magic to bind them together. Can you stand? Are you alright? Why you? What are you? I am Menu. I am a traveling summoner, and the scarabs have helped me. Summoners did not do martial arts like that, but he brushed that aside for now. Ellie wouldn't give it much thought until the shock left her body anyway. Yo, you saved me. I'm Ellie, a researcher at the Scarab Guild. I'm glad that you're fine. What about Bamble and Gain? Yes. Are you hurt? She swung around and tried to pick them up. However, the two started to roll their dung balls towards Menu. Menu had a bad feeling about it. To think that scarabs would be courting a human. Courting. The two scarabs stood on their balls and looked up at Menu as if to say, want to roll together? It was better than being kicked. But this was troublesome as well. As for what was troublesome, it was Ellie's eyes. They were scary, and burning with jealousy. In any case. Shall we go back? Yes. But I won't lose to you. Ellie growled as she passed Menu. Not that he wanted it or anything. But didn't these kinds of situations usually involve raising a flag with a beautiful woman? Instead, the flag was raised with the scarabs, and Ellie saw him as an enemy. A rival. Menu had to beg Bamble and Gain to roll their dung balls to the storage area, and then they all returned to the Scarab Guild. As the abductors were restrained with magic, he left them in a secluded spot and sent a report to the Knights Guild to pick them up. As a soldier had gone immediately, they should be arrested without any problems. After they returned to the guild, people were sent out to call back Ralph and the others. Ellie finally finished checking Bamble and Gain, so by the time Ralph and the others returned, it was time to release the night shift scarabs. However, the night shift scarabs then started to roll their balls towards Menu. And before long, he was surrounded by scarabs. What? Menu was in a dung ball paradise, and had his choice of anyone. Mister, I've been working here for a long time, and while I've seen people being kicked, I've never seen anyone being proposed to like this. By both male and females, the guild worker said with a sigh. Ellie burned with rage and jealousy. Ralph was trying not to laugh too hard. Ralph, that bastard. I suppose you will be the first and also the last, he said when he was able to breathe again. After that, he had to ask them to stop, as it interfered with their work. By then, it was already quite late into the night. Chapter 89, A Return to Adventure Life. After being able to relax for the first time since arriving in Nadar, they decided to pay a visit to the Adventurers Guild. Mofusen had apparently registered there a long time ago, and so when they checked his data again, it was revealed that he was now A rank. However, as he had been out of action for too long, it was decided that he should continue at D rank, along with Menu and the others. Mofusen accepted his plate, and then looked up at the quest board. They were targeting something in C rank, as it was the equivalent of completing 3 D rank quests. And if they completed 7, then they would get a promotion to C rank. However, there were not many quests above C rank. As Menu folded his arms and murmured, the guild worker at the reception desk called out to him. It's because of the war. While there are more gathering or farming requests, there are not many for hunting. I know, if you're confident in your skills, why not try out the named ones? Named? Apparently, it was about requests for extremely powerful monsters, which the country put a bounty on. While they had ranks, you could accept these requests regardless of your own rank. There was a good reward, and it was a good fit for their party, which was rather focused on combat. If you defeat ones that are A or B rank, then that will be taken into account. I will talk to the guildmaster myself. These are the current ones with bounties. And here's a map you can borrow. Thank you. But why are you? Menu was wondering why he was being so helpful. However, he stopped before finishing the sentence. Everyone else is busy. Most of the best adventurers have gone off to war, and have yet to return. It will likely be another month. But if you are traveling with this former A ranker, you must be good. And it would help us very much if you could do this, he said as he slammed a stack of about 20 sheets of paper on the table. In that case, Menu accepted them and the map without hesitation. At the table, they inspected the maps and search instructions. Generally, they were separated into different areas: island, forest, and grasslands. They were probably the bosses of each area, and so they did not overlap. Alright, let's start with the island then, Menu said casually. And then the guild worker offered to have a boat prepared. They really did take care of everything. Regardless, they went out into the town again in order to prepare for the journey to the island. The next morning, they gathered at the docks just as the sun was starting to rise. The guild worker and a fisherman greeted them. As always, Menu carried almost all of their belongings. However, each also carried emergency food. The fisherman then took them onto his boat, and they made for the remote island. There were 4 islands off the Nadar coast, and if you traveled further to the west, there was yet another one. But they only had business at one of them, the closest island, which was Solskjaer. All islands were uninhabited. It was decided that the fisherman would return for them in exactly 1 week. As they discussed such matters, the small boat slid across the sea and arrived safely at the island. It was like no forest that Menu had seen before. If anything, the place was more similar to a jungle. There were 3 with large leaves and the ground was thick with tall grass. The flowers were fragrant, and there were fruits of various, bold colors, as well as beasts and birds with unusual cries. Menu inspected all of this as he stepped foot on land. His hands were in fists that trembled. This really is like an adventure. I bet there will be a pyramid filled with treasure. What's a pyramid? Toto asked with a laugh. Menu suddenly froze. What is it again? I think I read about it in a book. But I forgot. Toto was impressed that Menu read so much. The others pretended that they didn't hear. Menu felt like they knew more than they were letting on. But since they had not said anything, he felt safer now. And he turned his attention back to the adventure at hand. After the fisherman left, they looked at the information sheet for the island. There were 4 of the monsters here: Hot Legs Torum, Shield Shelf Alice, Singing Princess Yaya, and Flying Damagaga. These names seem like they're trying too hard. Well, maybe it's just me. As Ralph was looking at it excitedly, Menu did not want to dampen his enthusiasm. Mofusson stroked his beard as he explained. Giving them impressive names will keep away the weaker adventurers. Anyone who would hesitate over a name is not up to the task. You sure know a lot. Anyway, the closest one is Torum? Apparently, it is a Garuda, said Menu as he looked at the map. Mr. Menu. What kind of monster is that? Toto asked fearfully. And so he thought back on knowledge he gained from books, as well as what he knew from his past life. A bird that can fight? It is humanoid and very aggressive. Also, I think they are strong against fire. Considering the name, maybe they have flames around their legs. He turned to Toto, who was now looking towards the jungle. Toto was pointing with a shaking finger. There is a bird monster with a humanoid shape and fiery legs. Indeed, it was exactly that. Its head was like a golden eagle's, and its wings were shaped like arms, and it had 2 strong legs. "Qeee!" cried the Garuda. And like that, it charged at them. Chapter 90, Hot Legs Torum. The Torum, who had fire enveloping its legs, rushed down to the beach with the strength Garuda were known for. The 3 moved into formation so that Toto was behind them. And then they glared at the Torum. When there was only 10 meters between them, the Torum jumped. In this world, the Garuda could not fly. And then it unleashed a fiery kick down towards Toto. Menu blocked it with his staff at the last moment. But it was so powerful that his arm went numb. Not bad. But why did it target Toto? Garuda had strong combat instincts. It would attack the weakest one first. If it was at a disadvantage, then you eliminate the weak one first. The instincts of a beast that wanted a fair fight with a strong opponent. Nice. It is strong, and might cause trouble if we left it. And so I might just make it mine. Menu did not like the idea of making weak creatures yield to him. But as a summoner, if he made monsters and divine beasts yield, then he would be able to summon them later. Of course, in Menu's case, it was faster to just fight himself, instead of summoning monsters. However, he had been thinking about it after talking with Mofusson. In spite of the fact that he had chosen to be a summoner because they could summon anything, he did not have a proper beast summon. Surely that was not good. And this was a famous monster that was strong. Menu would not feel guilt. Especially since this was a monster that was too dangerous to leave without killing it. If it submitted to Menu, then his word would be law. And it would not be able to harm others. Alright, I decided. Menu laughed, and the others turned to him. I am going to make all of them my beast summons. And so he left Ralph and the Mofusson to protect Toto, and then he held up his staff while approaching Torum. The Torum backed away in an aggressive stance. Menu pointed his staff at it and called out 5 water spheres. They were the size of basketballs, and they flew over the Torum's head. Torum, submit and become my beast summon. or else. This is what will happen. The water spheres transformed into pyramid shapes, and then beams of light shot out, hitting the spots where the Durham had been. The sands of the beach melted into glass. The ultra-hot heat rays gathered the light of the sun while targeting the Durham. He says he is impressed, said Mr. Vile. Thank you. But I would be even happier if you accepted me as a master. Menu thanked the Durham, and then he received a long answer. He says he does not like magic, and wants to fight. I'm not that good. But alright then. Menu waved his staff to erase the water spheres, and then he pulled out the sword from his staff and held it in front of him. Ho ho. He fights with a blade too. You cannot underestimate him. For some reason, he can fight with swords and do martial arts in spite of losing his memory. If I eat a lot, will I become like Mr. Menu? As Toto was finally at the point where he was only a little skinny, Ralph just nodded in agreement. Eating too much was not good for you, but he needed to make up for the years of malnutrition. Menu is going to do it, Mofusson muttered. The Garuda swiftly moved forward and then jumped to dodge Menu's sword. It then tried to go around to Menu's back, but Menu was faster, and so he easily moved away and behind the Durham. And then he swung his sword to the side, which the Durham parried with his leg. Menu was a little shocked. This sword was supposed to be able to cut through anything. It's the heart, Ralph shouted. I see. It was pushing away the blade without actually making contact with it, Menu thought as he sheathed the sword. I've never done it before, but I have drawn it many times. He had repeatedly watched videos for reference, and so it was easy to imagine it. It had been his job to draw movement. He stabbed his staff into the ground and posed as if to unsheath his sword. And then he laughed challengingly. Ralph and Mofusson had never seen something like it before. His waist was lowered, and it did not look like he could move quickly from there. His hand was on his weapon, but if he was not moving, then he would surely be attacked before he could unsheath his sword. However, Menu's range was longer than they knew. As soon as Durham was inside of it, Menu stomped down on the sand, and cut the Durham. It cried and then fell to the ground. Menu rushed to the Durham and cast Heal. Darul. It was a good fight, but I have won. Now, will you become my beast summon? He agrees. Mr. Vile interpreted for the now healed Durham. I hereby declare that the Hot Legs Durham is the beast summon of Menu. It was a short chant this time, unlike with Mr. Vile. At the same time, he tapped Durham lightly on the forehead. And then Durham turned into light, and the contract was complete. So it was fighting any fisherman that came close to the island. Durham, you cannot do that anymore. Sometimes, I will summon you, and we can fight. That will have to be enough. Also, you can train with Toto, Menu said as he read the search instructions. Durham cried once in agreement, and then returned into the jungle. Alright, now I have another summon. I better make a note of it so that I don't forget. This was quite a feat. It was a named monster that no one else could defeat. And Menu had tamed it instead of defeating it. Such a thing would draw a lot of attention. It seems like he can't help but stick out. You better be ready for such things, if you want to travel with him. Yes. He beat a dungeon floor boss with one hit. Mofusson shook his head and laughed with exasperation. There is no helping it then. So, which one is next? I'm hungry. We can decide after we eat. It was already dinner time now, and so they set up camp just outside of the jungle. With this spot as their base, they would decide their course of action tomorrow. But first, they took the ingredients they bought and the leftover meat, and made a meal of it. Chapter 91, Time to Ask Sekka. Good evening, Mr. Menu. As things had finally calmed down, Menu went to continue his conversation with Sekka. His consciousness would return if the others awakened him, and since they were in the same tent, his body should be safe. Do you remember where we stopped last time? Menu touched his chin and thought for a moment. This god of chaos called Apep got a human body, and is trying to destroy order. But the gods can't do anything about it? That is correct. As I said before, that world is too far away from us. After all, the roots of the sky tree grow there. What did the sky tree have to do with it? Menu was puzzled. Sekka detected this and continued. This tree that you call the sky tree. It is the order of that world. It creates the elements and manages all life. But the sky tree is just one of many. And through it, he can destroy the order of other worlds as well. I cannot interfere, because of the roots of the sky tree. Menu folded his arms and thought about this. In other words, Apep is trying to kill the sky tree, and that must be stopped. Yes. And we gods cannot do it. Our authority is restricted, and we cannot reach that far. Sekka bowed his head as he requested that Menu do something, and Menu had to stop him frantically. Please stop that. It's my fault for living in that way and having to be reincarnated. Indeed. Had he had a proper death, there would have been no thought of reincarnation, and Menu would not have been in this position. So in a way, Menu saw this as his own problem. I still don't know what this book of death or whatever is, but I want to draw that world. Like Ganon, everything that world was filled with. He wanted to draw it with his own hand, and so leave it to me. I know, someone really strong joined us today. And we're sure to meet other strong and interesting creatures. And so I want to draw them and go leisurely, but, well, think of us as being on a fishing boat. But I'll do it. It was not a speedboat or a rowboat, but he could still promise that they would be moving forward. Sekka understood the meaning and laughed. Yes, thank you. I know, Mr. Menu. It can be after you finish what you want to do, but please pay a visit to a town called Ramstliz. But before Menu could promise to do this, his consciousness was pulled away rapidly, and before he knew it, he was back in the tent. The others were still sleeping, but Menu alone had woken up for some reason. A singing voice. It was quite beautiful. A layered voice that shook the soul and made his eyes almost well up with tears. High-pitched, like a bell, and low, so as to shake the earth. He didn't understand the meaning of the words, but they bore a strong sadness. It was coming from outside of the tent. And so Menu put on a robe and picked up his staff as he went outside. He also took his pouch, just in case. As he followed the voices, he saw two figures in the rocky area. But as he got closer, he realized that it was just one figure. The bottom half was like a fish, with the torso splitting into two, with one side singing low and the other high. They wore beautiful accessories, likely salvaged from wrecked ships. However, there were no others around. The beautiful siren was likely singing Princess Yaya. Menu quietly took out the search instructions. Apparently, both day and night, she had put boats to sleep. And while she put them to sleep, she did not attack them. However, the result was the same, if they slept during bad weather. And because hearing the song had such an effect, no one was able to hunt her. However, Menu had resistance to such effects, so he listened to the beautiful voices and thought, just like Kazuya Yamamoto. Anomaly. The other sirens likely just had one torso. They did not sing with two beautiful voices. Their song would not move the soul so strongly. And so that's probably why I met them after speaking with Sekka. Once the song stopped, Menu clapped his hands. Then he smiled at the four eyes that looked at him in surprise. That sounded beautiful. I wish I could listen to it longer. So please, won't you join me as a friend? Menu did not add that he thought that they were alike. However, the feeling seemed to be conveyed. The two melodies continued again. She then jumped off of the rocks and into the sea. A moment later, she swam up to the beach where Menu was standing. Menu raised his staff and chanted, "Here, I decree that singing Princess Yaya shall be Menu's beast summon." And he gently tapped the two heads with his staff. "I will call you when I wish to hear your song. In the meantime, do not sing while there are ships around. Can you do that?" Yaya laughed happily, and the two pairs of arms folded, and the heads nodded. She had been driven away from the others of her kind, and there was no one who could hear her, as her rare voice put people to sleep. What loneliness that must have been. In any case, I would like to hear a little more. Please, Menu said as he sat down. And the two beautiful voices began to sing again. The moon was still high in the sky. Surely it was alright to listen to the joyous song for a little longer. Chapter 92, Shield Shelf Alice. The next morning, Menu yawned loudly, as he had been listening to the singing until dawn. Now that he thought about it, the only entertainment he experienced in this world was feasts. He had not listened to music or watched plays, and so he could not help but be absorbed by it. "Are you all right? Were you unable to sleep?" I'm fine. I just stayed up quite late." "Ah, that's right." As he prepared for the morning and talked with Toto, he passed the other three the mystery masks. "Huh? What's this, all of a sudden?" Ralph had a bad feeling about it, and so he stayed silent as he accepted it. They have resistance against sleep. He then connected to Mr. Vile, Kanan and Stan, so the resistance would be linked, and then he had the other three wear the masks, and then they were ready. Alright, now I will introduce you. Summon. A cocoon of water that was about the size of a human appeared, and then a siren with two torsos emerged from it. The other three were stunned. Menu looked at them smugly. Here is singing Princess Yaya, who I befriended yesterday. Yaya, if you would be so kind. Menu asked her to sing, and so Yaya began to sing a song in her beautiful voice. A song like splashing fish and like small flowers swaying in the spring. When she was finished with her song, everyone clapped. Yaya smiled happily. I befriended her while you were all asleep. I have resistance against status effects. It seems like as soon as I heard her voice, the resist activated and I woke up. Still, isn't it nice to have music while traveling? Apparently, Menu meant to use the siren's layered vocals for entertainment. He asked her to sing again sometime, and let her go. And then Menu took back the masks and severed the link. Well, that was a surprise. I didn't realize she would be a siren like that. Not only that, but you intend to summon her while we are traveling? She was alone for so long. That's not an answer. I've never heard such beautiful singing. Toto scratched his head and bashfully added that he also liked his mother's lullabies. Mofusen and Ralph were exasperated, but they knew that Menu would not change his mind. Besides, they could not deny that she had a wonderful voice. The problem was that you would be put to sleep immediately if you could not resist it. But on the other hand, it also meant they did not have to worry about being attacked by enemies. It might also help Toto develop a taste for the arts. Ralph forced himself to believe it. Stan was still flying excitedly in the sky, while Kanan ran around below. They too had enjoyed the music. Now, let's eat breakfast and then search for the other two. And so after this pleasant morning, they went about preparing for their adventure. As they would be leaving much of their belongings at the campsite, Kanan and Stan would stay behind. Just as before, the jungle was filled with creatures. It was like a paradise for Toto, and he constantly gathered plants and threw them inside of Mr. Vile. Menu inspected the search instructions and saw just why the phallus was being hunted. So it attacks people who are gathering herbs, just like Toto. I suppose humans enter its territory without realizing it. There were no signs put up inside of the jungle. But the herbs were too tempting to ignore. Humans were rather self-centered. But it could not be helped. You can continue gathering, Toto. It should not be long now. Yes. And then 5 minutes later, the sound of wings were heard, and a strange creature that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a human appeared. The base was a praying mantis. A cave mantis. It had thick limbs and large pincers, but also looked like a knight in armor. Phallus did not attack. It seemed to be observing us carefully. Even though Toto continued to gather, it did not attack. Oh? What if it was not the one to attack, but it was only watching the invaders, and it was the humans that attacked it first? Well, it would be difficult to remain calm when a 2-meter praying mantis was staring down at you. Phallus. Menu tried talking to it, and then the evolved cave mantis beat its wings and descended. It stopped about 2 meters away from Menu. We're sorry for intruding in your territory. Would it be alright if we gathered some herbs? Phallus nodded. As expected, it was not hostile. It was then that Durham appeared gallantly. Menu thought that they were going to start a territorial dispute, but apparently, they were about bettering each other, and so they started to train, where one would unleash a technique on the other. Should we really kill it? I don't think that is necessary. The instructions were wrong. But they won't be satisfied with that explanation. Well, I'll try talking to it, said Menu, and then he leapt up into the trees, where they were training. From branch to branch, trunk to trunk, he went. When he was right between them, Menu stopped Phallus's attack with his staff. Will you join me in order to prove that it was just self-defense? Torum was saying something to Phallus, which caused it to nod understandingly. Are you sure? What about training, Master? While this cave mantis pursues strength, it does not like to fight, said Mr. Vile, and Phallus nodded. That was why it just observed, even when someone invaded its territory. So can you promise that you will continue to not attack anyone, even when they come here? It nodded again, as Phallus quietly spread out its wings, Menu raised his staff. I hereby declare that Shield Shell Phallus, a beast summon of Menu. He tapped his staff on Phallus's head, and the contract was complete. It then went back to training with Torim, and so Menu scratched his head and descended to the ground. Well, that just leaves. It has a difficult name to pronounce. Flying Damagorgon. How dangerous. It attacks you out of nowhere, both on the island and out at sea. So it was the opposite of Phallus. As they tried to decide whether they should wait or go and search for it, there was a sudden roar that shook the forest. It must be the voice of the Damagorgon. As Menu and the others prepared to fight, Torim and Phallus joined them. Apparently, the Damagorgon did not only attack humans. The roars were getting closer. Chapter 93, Flying Damagorgon. The cry echoed from the top of a mountain that was in the center of the island. As they watched from between the cracks of the jungle trees, they eventually saw a frog-like silhouette. It was still quite far away. If the silhouette was visible, it must be very large indeed. The frog croaked, and then jumped down from the mountain. Perhaps flew was a better word. When it landed, the impact was so strong that it even shook the ground under Menu's feet. With heavy footsteps, it came closer. And then it jumped again. This time, it landed while knocking down the trees in front of Menu. It's huge. And yet it was fast. The trees were about the same height as a two-story building, and yet its head still stuck out from them. A large black toad. It croaked at them. And then it began to thrash around wildly, breaking the trees around it. There seems to be something wrong with it. As if it's going wild and trying to escape something. Not attacking us. Ralph spoke calmly while carrying Mofusson and Toto and easily dodging the Damagorgon. Torim and Phallus also moved back and watched the scene from the trees. Manu used the search enchant on his eyes and observed the Damagorgon, and then it appeared. Parasite. Mofusson, he said, and then he added enchant to Mofusson's eyes as well. He was good with barrier treatment and presence detection. And so Menu felt it would be faster to just show him. Oh, dear. In spite of being so big, it's being eaten away. Menu, could you get it to stop moving? He could not treat it while it moved so much. In that case, Menu gave the humans the mystery masks, and then made a connection to Torim and Phallus. Torim and Phallus were also surprised at how sudden it was, but after learning Menu's thoughts, they calmed down. And like that, they maintained their distance from the Damagorgon. As for Ralph and the others, this was the second one of the day, so they were quick to grasp the situation. And so they quickly put on the masks, and then Menu held up his staff. I summon, Yaya. A sphere of water appeared in front of the Damagorgon, and then the beautiful siren emerged. Make the Damagorgon fall asleep. Yaya nodded, and began to sing a lullaby to the trashing Damagorgon. No matter how loud the shouting was, as it was in a different pitch, it did not obstruct her singing. Besides, as singing was all that she did not like the idea of losing to someone else's clamorous voice. Eventually, the gentle lullaby swayed and washed over the Damagorgon until it lay heavily down on the ground. Presumably, the parasite within had also fallen asleep. And so Mofusson approached the Damagorgon's stomach. He searched for the parasite and cast a barrier. And then he manipulated the barriers so that it was spat out from the Damagorgon's mouth. It was about as thick as Menu's arm, and 3 meters long. The pale parasite twitched on the ground. It must be made about losing its host. This cannot be eaten. I'll let you eat something proper. Menu shouted over Toto. It was unclean and improper to say the least. He must be educated in such things. Torim. Burn it. Torim then used his legs, which were enveloped in flames, and stomped on the parasite's head, burning its body with it. As it was rather large, the smell of it roasting was rather appetizing. And everyone there had to look away awkwardly. After that, the Damagorgon was woken up. He had returned to his more quiet nature. It was clear that the pain had made him forget himself. Menu patted him on the nose. Hey, if things stay like this, someone will come in order to hunt you down. What about submitting to me? Menu understood that he was agreeing. And so he raised his staff and chanted. I hereby declare that the flying Damagorgon is now the summon beast of Menu. Now, he had finished all of the contracts on this island. Menu petted the Damagorgon's throat, and he croaked happily. It seemed that he liked people. It was then that Menu remembered had Phallus's territory had been ravaged, and so he asked Phallus what to do. He could return it to its previous state if he wanted to. It beat its wings and replied. And so Mr. Val translated. He says it's fine like this. Some plants become stronger after being stepped on. Menu was impressed by this attitude. He then realized that Phyllis looked embarrassed, as they were still connected. And then Mr. Val explained. Phyllis is the cave mantis queen. Oh, so she is female. He seemed to be attracting a lot of bugs recently. After that, he patted Phyllis and Torim, and praised Yaya, who had made the biggest contribution. You did very well, Menu said, and Yaya was so happy that she nearly broke out into song. And so Menu had to stop her. He was not connected to the Damagaga yet. If it fell asleep again, it could cause a lot of damage. Ah, that's right. Ralph, you should return to the camp with the others. What are you going to do? Menu laughed and took out his sketchbook and brush. Draw Hot Legs Torim, Song Princess Yaya, Shield Shell Phyllis, and Flying Damagaga. He spread open the sketchbook and used 2 pages to draw them. Torim was in a dynamic kick of fire. Yaya was singing beautifully, with patterns made of water. Phyllis was drawn with many plants, and looked like a queen. Damagaga walked through the mountains leisurely. He then wrote their names below the pictures, and from the monsters, something like a mass of magic energy emerged and went into the art. Like the time with Canon, they would remain in the book and not fade away. Yes. It turned out well. He showed them the book, and they peered at it curiously. You are very skilled, Master. You drew us well. I am very moved. Huh? As a queen, I feel proud. I promise to be useful to you. He could hear something. Apparently, he was now able to understand what they were saying. Menu brought up his status, and saw that he was now level 30. Also, there was a new skill, language understanding. Well, that's nice. It would be nice to get to know you all. Menu let out a sigh and then smiled at his new friends. Chapter 94, Tatara to Tarara. As they had accomplished their goal, they now had 5 days left before the boat would arrive to pick them up. And so due to Menu's strong request, they decided to spend the time adventuring. That being said, the island was small enough to be circled in one day. And since it would offer opportunities to secure a supply of meat, the others agreed to it. First, Torim invited them to his settlement, and they were greeted very warmly there. Torim was about 2 meters tall, but the average Garuda was close in size to Menu. The children were the size of Toto. There were flat lands around a stone altar and they sat down on grass mats and lived in a rather civilized fashion. Menu and the others were led to seats on top of the altar, and they were offered many fruits. So you are herbivores? Menu muttered in surprise, and Torim nodded. As we are birds. Well, he could not argue with that. All of the fruits were sweet and fragrant. It was something a Menu had rarely tasted in this world, and he ate them happily. Menu had often eaten nothing but glucose tablets, but when he thought back, he did have memories of eating various delicious things. Perhaps once he started to care again in this world, those memories had come back. After they were finished eating breakfast, the party continued their trek through the jungle. They avoided Phyllis's territory they were in yesterday, and went deep into the mountains. It was more tiring than when walking on flat ground, and so they took breaks in between. Though, Toto would use the opportunity to gather plants. On the way, they were attacked several times by monkey-like monsters. They had long white fur and cute red faces. However, they were very aggressive, and would throw fruits and jump around over their heads. Menu did not fight back, but instead summoned Phyllis to block their attacks. You do not use magic? Yes. I am a summoner, after all. It seemed a little late to be saying such a thing, but Mofusa nodded anyway. He wanted to stay on that path as much as possible. It was common sense that Menu had only learned recently. People would attack him if they were afraid. He did not want to scare others. And it was not as if he had to use magic. In that case, he should just avoid it, and do things that don't scare others. Currently, Menu was trying to search for a way to live while avoiding conflict. Still, when it came to times when he could not yield, or when it was necessary to use his abilities, he would not hesitate. That might sound like a contradiction, but there was a reason for it. After resting, they continued to walk. The deeper in they went, the more hostile the white monkeys became. Menu wondered what the reason was, but once they came out into a clearing, he raised his voice in surprise. Whoa! It wasn't only Menu. Ralph, Toto and Mofusen's eyes were also shining. Cannon howled happily and began to run in a circle. In front of them was a massive building that was carved out of rock. The walls were like stone slabs, and the sides were supported by 4 pillars in the shape of gods. The building was 2 stories tall. In the center there was an entrance, and a statue that stood there as if to guard it. A gatekeeper that had the head of a wolf. Menu and the others decided to rest there and eat lunch. They would explore the interior after they had eaten. Menu cooked. He grilled the fruits from earlier with meat and sprinkled salt over them. The sweet and sourness of the fruit went well with the meat. They drained it down with some tea, and then turned back to the building. The inside has been carved out so that there was a large chamber. And there were pictures drawn on the walls: farmers, sun, bugs, monkeys, plants, birds. A volcanic mountain, sea, fish, and sirens. All of the nature of the area, and the work of humans of the past were depicted. Huh. So people lived here a long time ago. No, it's the other way around. Other way around? Menu was puzzled by Mofusen's words. But Mr. Val explained. Previously, this island was part of the continent. And then it separated. Ah, I see. Like Pangaea, he muttered the last part to himself. Menu had assumed that this world was one single continent. But perhaps he was wrong. A world where there were places that humans had not explored yet. He was excited. The thought of being able to draw such a world sent shivers through his spine. He had not finished exploring this continent yet though. So he would not think about it until then. Menu took in a deep breath in order to calm himself. Suddenly, he saw a staircase in the corner of his vision. Oh, you can go underground. Let's go. Wait. But Menu ignored Ralph's warning and rushed to the entrance to the underground. And then he stepped on something that clicked. Seti had said it. Dungeons were filled with traps. Menu had forgotten that completely. Go go go. There was a rumbling sound, and then the round sun that was depicted over the entrance began to move. It disconnected from the wall, and started to plummet as gravity dictated. As for the entrance, the gatekeeper's spear moved to block it. Of course, Ralph and Mofusen, and Toto carrying Cannon and Mr. Wall ran down to the stairs where Menu was. Boom. Goragaragra. There was a loud crash as the sun fell down, and then it rolled loudly on the slanted floor. When they caught up with Menu, he returned to himself after being stunned, and they all rushed down the staircase. The sun accelerated. It rolled down the stairs at an alarming speed. Up ahead, the path stopped abruptly. Cannon. Stan. Please, Menu shouted, and then Cannon and Stan grew large, and they picked up Toto, Menu, Ralph and Mofusen and flew over the gap. Then the sun fell and fitted inside the gap perfectly like a bridge. They would be able to walk over it on their way back. That was close. No, it was incredibly fun. You bloody idiot. I thought I was going to die. Don't put old people in danger like that. There was a clang as false teeth fell to the ground, and the others landed safely as well. Inside, it was too dark to see anything. Menu took out a lantern just in case. But since there was no one else there, he used magic light without hesitation. What happened to acting like a summoner? Mofusen grumbled as washed his teeth. Menu thought for a moment and answered with a right man for the right job. That was not how the saying was used, but the others were too tired to reply. Chapter 95, Ardopolis. As they descended the gentle slope, they realized that this place used to be up on the surface. Only part of it was stairs, while the rest was a cracked floor that went downwards. Sometimes, there were large gaps, but nothing that could stop Menu and the others. There were things that used to be buildings on both sides, but they had been crushed and were misshapen. Wood Dragon. Was this place once a city? Indeed. It was called Ardopolis. A city with a temple at the very top. Menu had heard of the city-state called Polis, but not Ardo. Ardo? It is an old word that means earth. Then sun reigns over it, and life dwells there. This city once worshipped the temple of the earth, Master, said Mr. Val with a look of nostalgia. If it was a temple of the earth, perhaps they would have worshipped Mr. Val as well. Menu tried to think of something to say, but came up with nothing. It was a long time ago. But even now, there are remnants. And the temple as well. Master, there is something up ahead. It happened just after Mr. Val's warning. Something appeared vaguely in the darkness. What is that? A giant crystal? Toto narrowed his eyes. And then a few faint lights appeared. close to them and in the far distance. There were 10 lights in all. Damn it. Let's run, Menu. What is it, Mofusen? Mofusen's eyes shone sharply behind his white eyebrows. He turned on his heels frantically, and so Menu followed him. Though he still did not understand. Spawners. If you stay there, it will bring out enough monsters to defeat you. That was bad. It could cause a kind of stampede. And so Menu ran as fast as he could. Hurry. It seems like some are already born. Ralph took charge, and Toto ran with cannon on his back. They could sense the things chasing after them. 10, no 20 or more. Right now, their mission was to get out of there as fast as they could. While holding his staff and running, Menu willed it 20 meters ahead. Shortcut. A film of water appeared, and they all tumbled inside. And like that, they rushed out into the temple's entrance. The monsters were almost upon them. If they were unleashed here, they would ruin the balance of the ecosystem. While leaving the shortcut as it was, Menu rolled in order to kill the momentum of running, and then he turned around. All right. I'll leave the edible ones to Toto. No humanoids, apes or anything too creepy. Yes, Ralph, you support Toto. Mofusen, make sure to get any that slip through. I'll deal with the ones that can't be eaten. Fine. It will be good training for Toto. As acquiring food had been one of their goals, no one argued with Menu. Even though they were being attacked by monsters, they would be thinking about whether it was edible or not. In the meantime, the presence could be felt more strongly. Herds of forest lizards and volcano lizards, skull knights and white apes. Also, there were hobgoblins, cave mantises, mermen and kelpies too. Bugs, no. Horses, yes. Yes. Menu gave them orders. Toto had thought the cave mantis would be fine, so he frantically changed his mindset. Menu raised his staff and summoned 2 at once. A cocoon of rippling earth, and a cocoon of blazing flames appeared. Damagaga, Torim, I summon you. The 2 seemed to understand the situation, but Menu created a link to them in order to convey the details. Take down the humanoids and cave mantis. We don't need the crystals. And make sure that none escape, Menu ordered, and Damagaga answered, understood. However, Torim seemed more hesitant with an "Are you certain?" Menu did not understand what he meant, but what was in front of them now was the most important, and so he simply replied, yes. After that, there was a chaotic battle. Menu rode on top of Damagaga as he crushed the Skull Knights and Mermen with his giant hands and tongue. Torim dealt with the rest. And that is when he saw it. Damagaga was fine. He was a frog. He would probably eat something. But Menu had forgotten. Birds ate animals and bugs too. Torim held down a cave mantis and tore off an arm and swallowed it. After that, he ate the rest as well. And then he went off to the next one. Torim let out a high-pitched cry. It was similar to Stan's. And then the Garudas were at Torim's settlement, all gathered around and attacked the cave mantises. As I promised to stay out of Phallus's territory, it has been some time since we had nutrition like this that is not meat. Thank you. Yes. Menu muttered in reply. Indeed, when they had been invited there, they were served only vegetables. He then told Damagaga to avoid the cave mantis. For the first time since coming to this world, Menu saw a sight that truly disgusted him. And so he quietly cut the link to Torim. Of course, the Garuda was too preoccupied with the feast to notice. Menu only thought about the mountain of meat Toto and the others were likely carving up. Lizard and Kelpie, surely. And like that, he continued to take down the skeletons and fishmen. Though, his eyes remained upwards, as if trying to escape reality. After the long battle was ended, Menu saw the Garudas leave, and then he dismissed Damagaga and Torim. What was left was a field covered in crystals and meat. The cleanup was Menu's job usually, but this time, everyone helped. As they picked up the crystals, Menu alone looked pale for quite some time. Chapter 96, Berated over Crystal Exchange. They continued to explore the island the following day, but found nothing in particular. However, it was rich with resources. And so they acquired plenty of meat and fruits. And the party returned satisfied. They had even been able to gather some more in the volcanic lands that were the Damagaga's home. Also, the fishing boat arrived earlier in order to check up on them. And he was a little exasperated to see that not only were they well, but they appeared to be playing and having fun. They then returned to the guild to make a report. So, how was it? How many did you defeat? Menu and the others looked at each other. They had been defeated in a way, but perhaps they would not receive a reward. Finally, Menu raised his hand and asked, I am a summoner. Does making them yield count as defeating them? What? You did that? He nodded, and the old man went to the back. Apparently, this was unprecedented. In this world, a summoner generally just tamed large wolves and hobgoblins. After that, if they tried very hard, they might be able to tame a kelpie or cave mantis. The old man then returned. And he was followed by a short man with a beard. I'm the guild master. Yuga the dwarf? So, is it true that you tamed a named monster? Yes. Should I call them now? If he called them, he could prove it in an instant. But Yuga stopped him frantically. Menu was puzzled. Can't they freely change their size? You can really do that? Apparently, this was also not very common. With summoning arts, you used magic energy as a core, and created a temporary body for the summoned beast. You then called their consciousness, and it was complete. In other words, you just needed to make the temporary form small. That was what Menu thought. But in order to do that, it took precise control of the magic energy. Like using manifestation of all things and time-space manipulation, Menu was able to make incredible calculations without being aware of it. Normally, it was not possible. Damn it. He turned to look at Mofusen, but the old man turned away as if this had nothing to do with him. He felt that Menu was rather hopeless anyway. But Ralph looked angry. But I have no crystals, so there is no other way to prove it. So I'm going to do it, Menu said as he held his staff towards the counter. Yuga and the guild workers quickly moved back. He then imagined them as the size of model figures. Torim, Phallus, Yaya, and Damagaga. Summon. Small flames, leaves, water, earth. The spheres appeared and then the 20 centimeters figures appeared. You summoned 4 at the same time? And at this size? Mister. What the hell are you? Oh. So the simultaneous summoning was bad as well. Ralph could kill Menu with his eyes. Though, he too did not know much about summoners. Menu had yet to encounter any others, so perhaps it was not a very popular job. The small monsters waited quietly on top of the counter, but they were looking at Menu as if to ask him why they were called. Sorry. I just needed to prove that you are safe now. After seeing this, the guild workers all relaxed a little, and then Menu's eyes met Yuga's, and he felt a chill. He had fought through many battles and rose to guild master. And yet only he felt that fear. Summoners were often looked down upon. They tamed weak monsters, could not use magic, and were often made to carry the belongings of other adventurers. But what if you were as strong as Menu? He could tame monsters that the average adventurer could not beat, and he could freely control magic energy. If he could make them smaller, then he could also make them bigger. With such power, he could easily take control of this town. But he didn't do it, because he had no reason to do so. The guild master would have to be careful to not offend him from now on. Mister, that is enough. We will pay you the reward. I see that the island is indeed safe now. Ah, but there was a ruin with spawners. So I still think that people should avoid it. And then Menu took out the mountain of crystals. Oh, I almost forgot about them. Mofusen remembered and put the giant crystal on the counter. It was a skull knight they encountered in the forest. This is this from a named monster on the list. Holy Knight Vacom. Old man, you must be incredible. Apparently, they could tell a lot from the color and attributes of the crystal. It was the same with dungeon floor bosses. But the crystals were larger and had denser magic energy. Ah, also, these are from the others we killed on the way. The crystals now covered the counter. Yuga's hand shook as he picked one up. At least spread them out a little. Hey, send someone to the Merchants Guild. These won't fit in our safe. Yes. One of the guild workers ran off hurriedly. Mister. While it's good to defeat monsters, you can't bring so many of these in at once. Do you know what this will do to our wallet? I'm sorry. In the first place, you shouldn't have been carrying such a large crystal around for so long. I'm sorry. Why are there so many? Were you fighting a war? Don't ever go close to a spawner again. Yes, I'll keep an eye on him. After that, they showed the location of the spawner on a map, and after taking their reward money, they returned to their interest. One must not inconvenience others. Menu carved the words into his heart. Chapter 97. As they had some free time. They had nothing to do. This was because Yuga had banned them from hunting any named monsters. In exchange, their adventurer rank was raised up to B. It could not be helped, as this was the kind of work that would usually take an A-rank party a whole month. And yet they completed it so easily. They had also caused a disturbance financially, so that even Ling was angry. So they had to promise that they would avoid fighting any powerful monsters for some time. Perhaps they were also afraid of Menu becoming any stronger than he was now. However, when it came to that, Menu was beyond measure. He himself had no intention of using his power for evil. But that was by his own standards. For Yuga and the others, he was an ominous presence. Because of all this, he took off all of his equipment, and decided to lie low for some time at the inn. In the meantime, Toto worked in his atelier. Still, Menu was starting to get bored. All right. Menu seemed to have decided on something as he lay in his bed. And then he told the others about it at the dinner table. As they all spent their time separately during the day, recently, they only met during breakfast and dinner. I'm thinking of going on a little field trip, Menu said nonchalantly as he ate his stewed pork and flatbread. Field trip? So you are going somewhere? Ralph and Mofusen asked. Menu scratched his head and muttered, yes. While keeping my room here, there is a place I want to visit. You can come with me if you want. Obviously, I will go. I too am feeling sluggish from not doing anything. I would like to go, as I finished most of my work. Recently, adventurers were starting to return to the town. One of the reasons they had been ranked up, was probably so they would not cause chaos among the lower ranks. In that case, Menu wanted to head to Ramstliz, as Seka had told him. I want to go to a town called Ramstliz. Do you know it? Judging by the map, you should be able to walk there and back in a month, he said as he spread out a map on the table. It was the map he had made after seeing Ling's. His finger traced from their current location, Solcia, down the road and to Ramstliz. Where did you hear about it? It seems odd for you, Menu. Are you really that devout? Menu and Toto looked at each other with confusion. Ramstliz is. Someone I met in Amoles said that I should visit it. And since I have nothing better to do now, I thought I should go. What do you mean, devout? Ralph knew him longer, and sensed something. And so he explained. Officially, Ramstliz is called the City of Faith. A city that is filled with churches for the gods. So the residents there, whether young or old, are very devout. On the map, there was a split path. If you went this way, you would reach the Nadar royal capital. Normally, people go through here. It is a much more lively place. Completely different from Ramstliz. In other words, it was a place you would normally not go through unless you really wanted to worship. Menu knew nothing of religion. He had not allowed his life to be dictated by it in his past life, and he was not going to start now. However, he also trusted Seka. If Seka said that he should stop by, then there must be a good reason for it. Well, we could always stop by Nadar when we go to Magickaja. I still want to go to Ramstliz, since I was advised to go. Very well. Should we depart tomorrow? Menu thought about it. It did seem quite far to walk there. Wait a little. I'll make preparations. Fine. We will also prepare for the journey. And like that, it was decided that they would depart for Ramstliz within a few days. And they started packing the following day. Toto took his concoctions to the Merchants Guild, and Ralph and Mofusen went with him while also buying supplies for the journey. As they had made a fortune from selling the crystals, they were able to purchase a lot. Menu also visited the guild. That being said, it was only to meet the guild master, Ling. After waiting for some time, he was taken to a drawing room, and Ling appeared. What is it? I heard you emptied the coffers of the Adventurers Guild. Are you trying to do the same here? What a terrible accusation to make. Besides, those crystals were processed when they bought them, which should save them a lot of time. I don't think it was a bad deal for the guild at all, but it hurt our vault instead. As if you don't have a lot saved in there. Ling had practically started threatening him when he arrived in town. Though, Menu wasn't completely innocent either, so he could not complain. Ling chuckled at Menu's quick answers. A trading partner would not be equal if they were either overconfident or servile. Ling disliked such dealings. So, why are you here? I want to hire a carriage. If possible, with a driver with a tight lip. I hope you don't think we can spare a Pegasus carriage. They were amazing, and would be able to take them from one corner of the country to the other in no time. Of course, that was not a good thing for Menu. He did not want to stick out, and so he shook his head. An ordinary carriage with someone who will not complain about traveling with us. And someone who will not spread rumors. To be hired for a round trip to Ramsteris. How much? Menu's conditions were simple and easy to understand. Apparently, a driver for a Pegasus carriage required a professional. It will not be cheap. Because of the driver. 15 gold. It's a deal. She was clearly duping him, but Menu agreed at once. This amount of money could be covered by Menu's pocket money. After all, Menu was going because of Sekka's request. And Menu was also the one to choose to go by carriage. If they went with a shared carriage, there might be trouble. And he was anxious about having to sleep around strangers. Very well. I'll make sure that it's ready to leave by midday tomorrow. Thank you. And so Menu succeeded in acquiring a carriage with a roof and a driver. He had not ridden in a carriage since the journey with the Pegasus. And so Menu felt quite excited as he returned to the inn and told the others that they would be leaving tomorrow. Chapter 98, Wagon Journey, Depart. Hello. It's nice to meet you. I am Kara, your driver. When they arrived at the Merchants Guild around midday, they found a 4-horse covered wagon. A capable-looking woman was standing there in a tidy butler uniform. She bowed and greeted them. She had dark skin and long black hair that was tied in the back. Ling was standing next to her and smoking her pipe. Since you are an important customer, I thought it should be a wagon with a roof. You don't mind sending a woman driver? Menu wondered. Ling nodded as if to say, show them. Kara then showed her status. She was a merchant. However, under that, it showed that she had the bodyguard skill. She is the strongest of my attendants. No one could do better than her. Well, we aren't going to do anything so dangerous. They then shook hands, but Kara looked at them strangely. It was because they had very little baggage. They would pitch tents at night, and they needed food as well. Don't worry, it's all here. Surely it is best if the carriage is light, Menu said with a laugh as he showed his pouch. Kara nodded. Well, let's go then, she said as she climbed up into the wagon. Menu handed Ling a leather bag. Inside the wagon, there was a thick rug and cushion to sit on, a space to put your things. But as they had nothing to put there, it was currently used for Kara's modest baggage. Once everyone was inside, the wagon started to move slowly. However, they picked up speed once they were out of the town gates. Menu opened the window and took in the breeze. He could not help but be amazed by the sight that rushed past them. Toto, look. Yes, they were like excited children. Even though it was shaking, Mofusen and Ralph drank some tea from their bottles. Menu was happy at this surprisingly comfortable trip, but when he looked to the driver's seat, he saw that it was bare wood. There was no cushion, and this was likely to be a long journey. Miss Kara, doesn't that hurt? I am quite fine. You can use this. I have another cushion. So saying, Menu pushed the cushions over to the driver's seat, so that it was all fluffy and soft before she could protest. She was being paid for this work, and seemed used to such travels. Still, this would take a week. Surely there was nothing wrong with being more comfortable. Thank you. You are welcome. Just stop when you get tired. And then we can rest. I don't really know how this works, so we'll follow your schedule, Menu said, and then he returned to the back. He took out his sketchbook and drew a picture of a cushion. Like this, he made several. Since there is space, maybe I'll make a bed for Miss Kara as well. The covered wagon had a sturdy frame, with doors in the front and back, as well as windows. And there was empty space in the back that was big enough to fit a bed. Using his brush, Menu established the perspective, and in his sketchbook, he drew a curtain hung from a beam, and behind it, a comfortable-looking bed mattress. There were 4 feather pillows and cushions, and he also included a chest for storing luggage. Some men might not care, but Kara was a woman. And so he added a large bucket for wiping yourself, and a fluffy towel. What do you think? He asked the other 3 men. Mofusen inspected the picture as he stroked his beard. I do not think that it lacks for anything. After all, the bathroom would be outside. Surely. How about putting a carpet on the floor? He accepted Ralph's suggestion and drew a carpet. If there is anything else, she can tell me later, Menu concluded, and then he manifested the art. There was a clunk as the wagon suddenly became heavier, and it swayed. What is happening? Kara frantically stopped the carriage and opened the front door to look inside. There was now a comfortable room there that had certainly not been there before. Ah, sorry. You must have been surprised by how quick it was. I made a room for you, Miss Kara. What do you think? Menu asked her hesitantly. She looked at him blankly. She had heard that this man was rather strange, but that was clearly an understatement. Normally, you would not place a bed inside of a wagon. You would not make a room. More importantly, you did not create things out of thin air as if it was nothing. There was even a curtain. Is there anything else you might want? If anything, you might have made too much. Oh, I'm glad then. Kara realized that she had brought her tent and other things for nothing. But Menu did not seem to care. I could make extra clothes if you need. Yes. Huh? Indeed, she only had one extra change of clothing. Still, this was all very confusing to her. I suppose you do not have pajamas? I'll put them in the chest then. Should we take a break? Kara could do nothing but shake her head silently and return to the driver's seat. The journey had only just begun, and yet this had happened. She now understood why Link had said they needed a driver who was tight-lipped. However, she was now wishing they had chosen someone else. Chapter 99, Is this really a wagon journey? Kara thought. This is too comfortable. First, when they stopped to rest that day, the passengers had already prepared ingredients, and they quickly built a stove and cooked it for lunch. And it wasn't simple preserved food. There was fried lizard meat and vegetables sandwiched with bread, and vegetable soup as well. She had assumed that he had some kind of ability related to space, but if he was storing fresh food, then it could not be any ordinary item pouch. It would be a more advanced ability called item inventory. Also, she wondered why there was a child with them. But this child was using water magic for cooking and cleaning. Normally, it was not worth using magic for that. And yet he did it as if it was nothing. After they rested, they continued the journey for a little longer, until the sun started to set. And so she stopped near a tree and suggested that they set up camp for the night. Again, they surprised her. They did seem to be used to travel, but the tents were pitched in no time. As for Kara, she was allowed to sit on a cushion near the fire. After dinner, which was once again quite impressive, they served some kind of white sweets, which were pierced with branches and roasted over the fire. Ralph looked disgusted at first, but they were delicious. Sweet and fluffy. Once the dessert was finished, Menu called Kara to the wagon. He waved his staff and something like a small rain cloud appeared. Inside, there was a small burning fire. He moved it over to the tub, and steaming hot water rained into it. It will stop when you tell it to. Also this. He gave her some soap that was of unbelievably high quality and smelled amazing. Tell me when you are done. Your pajamas are inside of that chest. Wasn't he supposed to be a summoner? Kara just went with the flow and took a hot bath, in spite of being in the middle of traveling, and washed her body and hair. Apparently, the men would wash up in the morning. It was good that they cared about cleanliness, but there was no water nearby. So it would likely be magic water again. Am I really washing my hair with water inside of a wagon? The smell of soap filled the area, and when she said stop, the magic water really did stop. She was the driver, but felt like a customer. This was likely more comfortable than when nobles traveled. She washed her clothes and dried herself. Then she changed into the pajamas in the chest. When she went back out, Menu was waiting with his staff. It was time for the drying magic he had once used on Ralph. You might catch a cold if your hair is wet. Do you have a comb? Yes, I do. She took it out frantically as her hair was dried. Yes. Do you want more tea? Or will you go to sleep? Sleep. Yes. Good night. Good night. When she went back to the wagon, the shower magic had disappeared. This is all very comfortable, but while lying in the soft bed, Kara put a hand to her forehead. The surprise is also tiring. Would she ever get used to it? She wondered as she drifted off to sleep. She's asleep. Indeed. Ralph and Mofusson. They had been careful to keep their voices hushed around her. You bloody fool. It's because you kept using your powers without restraint. Mofusson shouted quietly, which was quite a feat. Ralph grabbed Menu by the collar. You did far too much, fool. And what was with that food? As they had not said anything, Menu had just assumed it was fine, and continued on. But she's the driver. Also, I thought she should be comfortable. That doesn't mean you have to make a whole room. That is completely abnormal. Mofusson was so angry that his teeth went flying out of his mouth. But We did ask for someone who wouldn't spread rumors. That doesn't mean you have to show her everything. Yes, I'm sorry. Manifestation of all things, magic creation, the 7 magic attributes and spatial magic. He had shown all of that and more. After rebuking Menu for his recklessness, they returned to the tents and went to sleep. It goes without saying that Menu's blanket was wet with tears. I will be more careful tomorrow. When the sun rose, Menu and the others wiped themselves and changed their underclothes, and then prepared breakfast. By the time that Kara got up, there was a delicious smell. Good morning. Breakfast is ready. Good morning. Did I keep you waiting long? Menu shook his head and smiled. I wonder how much progress we can make today. Menu took out a map while holding his food with one hand. Then they all surrounded it. Kara pointed to where she thought they could reach, and they excitedly inspected the surrounding area. There was a river and a village. They sounded like innocent children with how they talked. Kara chuckled and Menu blushed as if embarrassed. Toto and Ralph laughed as well. Like this, they enjoyed the journey for the next week. It was usually the big child that would want to take detours, while the mother and grandfather had to stop him. And then the younger brother would console him. Right now, there was a great stone wall in front of them. A guardhouse was in front of the large gates, and there was a line of people waiting to enter. They had arrived at the city of Ramstlis. Chapter 100, There Are Gods. Well then, please let me know when you wish to leave. Thank you. We will be here for about 3 days, so you can do what you want. Thanks to the Ling's reference letter, which Kara carried, they were able to enter Ramsteros with ease. They then went to an inn, which Ling had also recommended. There were numerous tall, stone buildings here, which reminded Menu of the concrete jungles of his old world. However, the air here was completely different. Menu felt like he was in an empty museum. After securing their rooms at the inn, they decided to walk around the city. The streets, both large and small, were orderly and clean. As everything seemed to be made of stone here, the grayish-white color was almost blinding. The scarabs also seemed more quiet here than other places. But maybe it was just his imagination. They did not feel like talking while they walked in such a place. As they continued to walk down the main street, Menu heard a voice inside of his head. Mr. Menu. Continue straight here, and then go to the church around the corner. Sekka. He almost said the name out loud, but held back. That was how close the voice was. When he raised his head, he saw a large church at the end of the street. Menu ran towards it without saying anything. The others rushed after him. Hello, Menu said as he burst through the doors. Inside, he saw Sekka, standing there in white robes. Sekka. Mr. Menu. I'm glad that you have come, but why? No. Huh? Menu rushed forward, and happily hugged Sekka, who then touched Menu's face with his hands and patted him on the head. Yes, you seem well. It is proof that you have been living a civilized life. Aha. That tickles. Stop it. That's when the others arrived. Menu. Is that the man that you are acquainted with? Ah, Ralph. Sorry for leaving you behind. I was called and... Menu hesitated, but saw that Sekka just laughed and nodded. This is the god, Sekka. Sekka. These are my friends, Ralph, Toto, Mofusen, Mr. Vile, and Cannon. And that is Stan, hiding behind the ropes. I know. I was watching you the whole time. Sekka bowed gracefully. Aside from Menu, the humans had no idea what was happening here. Toto was the first to react. A god. Yes. Young Toto, you have worked very hard. Are you enjoying life now? Sekka said with a smile, not even trying to hide his godly aura. Now that he was not dressed like a gentleman, Menu realized just how much he did look like a god. Sekka made them all sit down, and then he stood at the podium and bowed gracefully once more. I am Sekka, the god of the underworld and of the arts. I am sure you have heard of me before. Ralph and Mofusen straightened their backs. They must know then. At the same time, tea and sweets suddenly appeared in front of everyone. I thought that you would not believe me unless I did something like this. There were colorful macarons, cake and tea. Only Mofusen was given mochi, sweet bean jelly and green tea. Sekka had his own afternoon tea set, and he gracefully took a sip from his cup. There was also another bowl. Menu asked about it, but Sekka shook his head. It was a secret for now. So, as for the reason that I wanted to meet all of you, sorry, I'm late. A voice echoed from above. and then a man landed on the ground with a great thud. He was wearing similar white robes as Sekka. He was a big man that must have been around 2 meters tall. He had red, braided hair, and looked rather intimidating. His eyes were strong, and seemed to change color in the light. "We have just finished with introductions. Now it is your turn." "It's good to meet you, Menu. And the rest of you. I am Horus, Chief of the Gods," he said, while banging his fist against his chest. Menu's eyes widened in surprise. "Is Set not here too?" "Set is in a dungeon right now. As there is a new one here." As they chatted like this, the others finally came back to life. "Chief God Horus? This is what happens when you live long enough. Even I know that name." "Whoa, Horus-tan is a big man." One of them was shocked because he was used to seeing the girl version. Sekka's appearance was already a miracle, but their surprise only grew. Regardless, Horus laughed boisterously and sat down. "So, did you tell them?" "As I said, we only just finished with introductions." "I see. Then I will tell them." Sekka drank some of his tea and then looked serious at the surprised party. "I want you all to help Menu." Chapter 101, Faith City Ramsteris. "Help Menu." Ralph looked suspicious. This was because, outside of drawing, there was no consistency to Menu's actions. What he was doing or trying to do, he could not understand. "Mr. Menu is not to blame for this. Allow me to explain," Sekka said with a chuckle. Menu had not told the others that he had been reincarnated. That was all. He started with how Menu had lived for 23 years in a different world, and how when he was reincarnated, the evil god Apep descended into this world, and how he was trying to destroy all worlds. Sekka told them everything with great detail. He even told them about how Menu must act as a representative of the gods and complete the Book of Death in order to defeat Apep. Originally, the Book of Death was a guide for going to the Eternal Garden of Aru. However, what is wanted from Menu is the depiction of order. The creation of a book that depicts all the elements. Apep was born from chaos. Everything else was born from order. If Mr. Menu could contain all order in a volume, then he will be able to face the chaos. Well, simple enough. In other words, it's the rules of the world that define good and evil and the soul. It's all easy to understand in this world. Everything is born from 7 elements. Cannon over there is one shape that they can take. Mofusen stroked his beard as he mewed over the words. In other words, what Menu is supposed to do is draw divine beasts of the various elements. Like Cannon. "Yes, old man. It's good that you understand quickly," Horus said with a laugh. However, Ralph and Toto found all of this quite difficult to swallow. Mofusen had more experience. But even he was surprised. "We gods left everything to the Skytree. Which is managing the order. I am able to appear here now, because of the great faith in this city, but that is all. If I left this city, then I would just be like anyone else. Aside from being immortal and unaging, that is. It is true that this was our mistake as gods. We should not expect much from Menu, who is just a reincarnated human. However, we have no other choice. But we do not want him to bear the burden on his own. And after seeing you travel with him, I saw that you will be able to help with shouldering the burden," Horus said. He seemed to be waiting for a reply from Ralph, Toto and Mofusen. Menu looked rather uncomfortable, but kept his mouth shut and waited. He had come here as requested, only to have the gods drop a bomb on his head. "I will help. Menu saved my life. So I don't mind." "Me too. I would not be here if it were not for Mr. Menu," said Ralph and Toto. "Ho ho. I have no objection either. In the first place, I came along because I thought that an old man like me might still be of use," Mofusen said with a hearty laugh. "All of you." Menu was not the only one who was relieved by their answer. Horus and Sekka were also relieved as they smiled. "Thank you." Thank you. We will also do what we can to help," said Sekka and Horus. Menu thought about this and then asked the question that had been on his mind. "By the way, couldn't you add to their statuses? Like you did with me?" "No. This is a world that is separate from our own. We cannot interfere at this point," declared Horus. Menu's eyebrows lowered. "But they are all very strong people, so it is hardly necessary." "Close to a hero, really. Humans are supposed to correct the chaos in the human world. And so heroes are born. But perhaps now, they have reacted to Apep, and then gathered around Menu. Everyone looked at each other after hearing Sekka and Horus's words. They had never thought that their connection could be a result of fate. You are all like an antibody that was made by order. The way you are, live and die. All of it is managed by order. It is not about will. Your will made the connection, so that order would make things happen that way. In other words, order was not first, but it helped them on their path. This was not a very satisfying explanation, but they did not argue. After all, gods were not supposed to lie. Well, it's a natural reaction. Apparently, humans do not like to hear about fate. Horus chuckled. He clearly did not understand it. But if their lives had all been managed by order, and their fates were decided, Ralph losing everything, and the death of Toto's mother. If those were things leading up to this, that was hard to accept. Ralph and Toto looked down. In other words, when humans want to do something, it is order that helps move things in that direction. Menu asked with a confused expression. Ralph and Toto raised their heads. That's how it is. I see. That's why Ralph has so many sword skills. Toto wanted to help his mother, and so he has so much magic energy. You two are amazing, Menu said. It was not clear whether he really understood or not. Mofusen is amazing. His imagination is so different. He used his power in such interesting ways. There's no need to compliment an old man so much. Yes. In other words, there was a desired path, and if they had not wanted it, then they would not have become connected to Menu. He had wanted to become a hero, and continued to train. And so in answer to that, order had given Ralph sword skills. Toto had wanted to help his mother, who worked hard to raise him. And so he acquired great magic energy. The human wish came first. Order would answer and manage the world's rules around it. Ralph and Toto had misunderstood it at first, and so they now looked at each other and laughed. Being connected to this guy. It has a twisted sense of humor. However, it was the road to being a hero. I feel like I've been pulled into something very big. However, Toto had gained his freedom by becoming involved with Menu. You. Please. Help me. All right. Menu bowed to them with a troubled expression. Of course we will. It will be for my own benefit as well. I could never repay you enough, Mr. Menu. They nodded, and Menu smiled happily. Thank you. Well, now that we are finished talking. Eat, said Horus. Now that they thought about it, no one had touched the sweets. These are from Mr. Menu's old world. They are very delicious. And so the four finally reached out and ate them. Aside from Menu, the others had notable reactions. Sweet. My teeth are melting. So this is what you were eating. What a luxury, Ralph said as he thrust more into his mouth. Clearly, he had a sweet tooth. So much sugar. Well, it goes well with this tea. Were you a really important person, Mr. Menu? As Menu had it regularly with Sekka. He had not noticed it. But it was true that there were not many sweet snacks in this world. Sekka must have done this on purpose then. If you come visit me again, then you can have as much as you like. You should visit us once in a while. It was bait. Menu glared at the two gods, but they ignored him and drank their tea gracefully. Chapter 102, Chaos and Order. While enjoying the tea and snacks, the four humans asked the two gods numerous questions. After all, someone was trying to destroy the world. They had to learn as much as possible. Though, in spite of all that, the atmosphere was quite relaxed, like any other tea party. After being asked, Horus explained everything to them in an orderly fashion. First, I'll tell you about chaos and order. While I said the world would be destroyed, to be precise, I meant it would turn into chaos. Well, perhaps it is the same thing. Horus then made two spheres of water. One was a beautifully round globe, while the other was warped and distorted. The round one is a world with order. And this other one is chaos. Keep that image in your mind, Horus said as he made them vanish. Instead, two human figures made of water appeared. Within the thin membrane of order, energy circulates according to the set rules. This is what a living organism is. And this is what chaos is. The two dolls were crushed and turned into one. And then it became like the first misshapen sphere. Everything melts and merges. There are no individuals. All civilization and nature fades away, and there is no sky or land. Everything becomes one. That is chaos. Horus pointed to Ralph and Toto. Imagine it. There is no border, you melt down and everything becomes one. Everything, from the color of undergarments to your internal organs is shared clearly. You would go mad. But as there is no self in the chaos, you would disappear. Like that. Ralph and Toto scowled. Apep is fine. He was born from chaos. It would be a world where he alone has a conscience. For him, order is just a nuisance that gets in his way. So he must be stopped at all cost. But, exactly how can the Sky Tree be destroyed? Menu asked, and Horace folded his arms. There is nothing you can do from far away. The Pegasus cannot reach it, so you have no choice but to befriend a divine beast or dragon. There is also the possibility of modifying the body to reach it. Regardless, both methods would take time. The others looked at each other at the mention of body modification. They had a connection with a certain potion recently. Hey, what does Apep look like in this world? Menu asked for the others. Sekka looked like he was surprised that he had not told them already. He is the leader of the Wind Clan. So we've been quite involved for a while then. Obviously, he would know what Menu would do. And it would have been easy to stop Menu. He knows, and is ignoring you on purpose. We met them once, but we could deal with them again. Sekka and Horace looked at each other with puzzled expressions. If we sense something wrong, we will tell you. But for now, it seems like he prefers to stay quietly in the Sky Tree. However, it's also possible that he is gemming us. He was reincarnated into this world with a lot of abilities. You should gather information as well. Ah, it is almost time. The sunlight came in through the west-stained glass window. It seemed that they had to return while the sun was setting. Menu felt a little sad that they were leaving. But it could not be helped. Ah, Menu. I do think that you don't have to force yourself to fit into this world so much. Indeed. I think that you should relax a little. Menu wasn't sure that he understood. If he stood out too much, that could cause a lot of trouble. Menu did not want that. However, there was truth in their words as well. Perhaps he was not making the best use of the abilities that he was given. Don't overthink it. In other words, it's fine to have a good time as well. Exactly. You have a free way of thinking, and that is fine. As I said earlier, order moves based on the wishes of people. People do not need to match order. You drew me as a little girl. What could you possibly be scared of now? He could not argue with that. Yes. I will think about it then. Ralph had quite the reaction, as if he was bracing himself for Menu to become even more abnormal. I do feel bad for putting such a burden on you. And so I want you to have fun as well. Some things should not be done. But your effort has been wonderful. So please stretch out your wings. Don't waste this second life you received. The two gods said their final words, and then they disappeared into the western light. The four humans that remained then decided to return to the inn. No one said anything on the way back. But it wasn't due to being overwhelmed by pressure. It was because they were afraid of Menu becoming even more absurd. Also, they were wondering if they wanted to see or not see Menu's drawing of Girl Horace. Chapter 103, Wrongs Must Be Righted. I was wrong. I'm sorry for causing you so much trouble up until now, Menu said with a serious expression, as they sat down to eat dinner at the inn. The other three looked at him suspiciously. Though, each for different reasons. Ralph was skeptical. Toto thought Menu was sick from eating too much sugar, while Mofusen was undecided. He had been strangely quiet on the way back from the church. But this declaration was even more strange. Though, perhaps not completely unexpected. I realized after talking to Horace and Sekka that I haven't been making good use of my abilities at all. Wait. You can't be serious. Ralph objected. Mofusen and Toto looked at the sky from the window. But there were no signs of rain clouds. Wait. I am serious here. Are you listening to me? He said while poking his stead with a fork. He did not sound very convincing, and so the others had no choice but to listen. This whole time, I was thinking that I have to do my best to fit into this world. But I realized that this means I was holding back when it came to my own imagination. While it sounded like he was saying something decent enough, these three knew of his past actions, like killing a giant troll with a single lightning spear, creating Cheetah, Stan and an army of Medjed. He made masks with strange powers. He made a hidden grave for Toto's mother. And more recently, he saved a forest from lava and made it train spears over a battlefield. For instance, like this, Menu made sure that there was no one else around, and then he drew a silver box and made it materialize. And then he placed his empty plate inside of it. 3 minutes later, he opened the lid to reveal that the plate was not completely clean. The other three were quite surprised by this. Was it a new type of magic tool? But they knew of none that did such everyday chores. This is called a dishwasher. You see, my imagination is filled with all these things from old memories of my past life. But up until now, I was only making things to fit this world of swords and sorcery. So it wouldn't look strange to people here. And that is very limiting. Menu waved his hand, and dismissed the dishwasher. Then he leaned on his elbow with a faraway look. If people are going to see me as a freak anyway, then I might as well go all out. Of course, I know that I can't just show everything. And I don't want to rely on this ability too much either. What are you trying to say? Ralph asked with narrowed eyes. Menu was surprised. Huh? That is the conclusion. Be exact. Say it. You idiot. But I was being very detailed. Menu was showing his lack of communication skills once again, and the other three could only sigh. You are very light. Yes. I don't know what he is going to do at all. Mofusson and Toto chuckled. In the meantime, Ralph's lecture continued, much to Menu's shock. He didn't understand. Why? But why? Still, the lecture was effective. The following day, Menu took everyone to an empty field. Thankfully, the harvest was already over, and so it was just vast brown fields. All right, I'll be more clear this time. Watch this. Menu started to draw swiftly in his sketchbook. Summon. Menu summoned a house in a shape that they had never seen before. The roof was made of panels of glossy black, and the walls were made of wood and stone. There was also a lot of glass used in the two-story, square-shaped house. Rejected. Reject. Whoa. It's a house. While it was rejected, Menu insisted that they wait a moment. Decide after you go in. This house is very comfortable to live in, even without magic. Menu was very excited. Ralph had enough magic energy for everyday magic, and Toto and Mofusson had even more. So to be frank, it was not very useful. Still, they went inside of the house anyway. There was a toilet that flushed at the turn of a lever, a cooking stove that didn't use fire, and a room that had an automatic light when people entered. Most surprisingly, none of this involved magic. According to Menu, the room used panels that gathered energy from the sun, which was then used throughout the house. Toto was genuinely overjoyed by all of this, but Ralph and Mofusson were scared. If it became known that such a thing was possible, then even more people would want to target Menu. Even if they could not capture Menu, they could take Toto. Or Ralph and Mofusson as hostages. No, rejected. Indeed. Erase this now. TSK. Well, what if it is not made to last, but just for temporary use? Menu asked them after they had exited the house, and he had erased it. The two thought about it for a moment. Menu. Convenience is a great power. Indeed. If you show it off, then it will attract unwanted attention. That house just now. It is as tasteless as dropping gold in front of a beggar. Even an honest man will be tempted to take it if he sees it. As long as you keep that in mind, I won't say anything. After this wave of attacks, Menu squatted down and held his head. Still, he got back up soon after. In other words, it's fine as long as no one sees it. Good. Thank you. No, that's not it. However, the two were too tired to argue with him now. Chapter 104, Return of the Gold Dragon. Mr. Menu, please come to the church at once. Menu received this summons from Sekka shortly after the house incident, when they were making their way back to the town. Sekka is calling us. The god? Then we must go. And so they rushed back to the town. They ran through the plain, grey streets, and entered the church with loud footsteps. Sekka stood inside with a serious expression. Ah, you have come. Thank you. You called, so of course, I would come. What happened? We were being jammed after all. The gold key is rising tremendously. Gold key? The gold dragon? Indeed. I realized it once the lava started to flow into the sea. It will start to encroach on the water at this rate. The elements of this world were based on a concept similar to the 5 elements theory. According to this theory, metal is supposed to generate water. Therefore, if it was eroding, it was clear that the gold dragon must be significantly influenced by Apep in some way. I thought he was lying low, But he was doing such a thing. Mr. Vile said angrily. Yes, after doing so much in the Valor Forest, he had not done anything for some time, so it made sense that it was because he had changed his approach. Mr. Menu, you must go to the base of the Gold Dragon, and somehow weaken its power without killing it. Killing it would ruin the balance, right? He remembered it, because Mr. Vile had scolded him once before. Dragons were phenomena. If they died, it would change the balance of the world. It was a very troublesome thing indeed. If you had such an important role, it would be nice of you to avoid being affected so easily. The place is here. The lava is flowing from the 2 mines that surround the golden city of El Dorado. Sekka pointed to an island country that was to the southwest of Ramsteris. Menu recognized the name. This is the country that supported Magicka during the war. They have a strong notion of being the chosen people. And so you must stay hidden while you are there, or you may be executed. Oh, while they were going to help, it did not seem like a lot of fun. However, there was no point in complaining about that now, and so Menu turned to face the others. As you just heard, it will be a dangerous job. So, I can go alone, the other 3 sighed. They looked at him with exasperation, as if to say, isn't it a little late to be saying that? And even though Menu was bad at communicating, he could understand what they meant. I may not be that useful, but I will go too. Kian, Mr. Vile and Cannon were also enthusiastic. Please, go and calm down the Gold Dragon. Menu nodded, and then they turned around and left the church. They thought that they would then decide on their future direction, but then Menu continued to walk and went around to the back of the church. While they didn't understand, the others had no choice but to follow him. Even by carriage, they would have to go through half of Nadar and the Magicka, before taking a boat. It was a long journey. There were many preparations that had to be made, but, hey, Menu. I know. Still, we cannot spend too much time running errands. That was one way to describe a mission from God. Regardless, once he saw that there was no one watching, Menu took out his sketchbook. Secluded. Out of sight. Confirmed, he said. And then he began to draw something. The others had a bad feeling about this. Still, it was too late to intervene. Summon. Menu called it out. However, Ralph and the others could not see anything. No, wait. The area in front of them did look like it was a little warped. And moving. Yes. So, here is the invisible Pegasus carriage. Now, let's go and get this over with. That was when Ralph realized it. Menu was a little upset in his own way. Invading Mr. Vile's territory was bad enough, but this is going too far. It's so troublesome. What is wrong with this dragon? He grumbled as he opened the door and gestured for them to go inside. Then he sat down in the driver's seat. After that, Menu's body became invisible as well. It won't matter if I say anything now. And so Ralph and the others sat inside the carriage quietly. It was surprisingly spacious. Apparently, he had used spatial manipulation to make it larger on the inside. And it was filled with cushions to make things more comfortable. The seats also came equipped with belts. While thinking it strange, Ralph decided to strap himself in anyway. And then Mofusen and Toto did as well. It was because he had a feeling Mr. Vile was holding tightly to Toto, and both Cannon and Stan had their claws deep into the seats, all buckled in. Good. I made it easy to understand. Now, let's go, came Menu's calm voice. He then grabbed the reins, and the Pegasus carriage rose upwards at a near right angle. Once they were high enough, the carriage rushed forwards at an incredible speed. Even though they were inside, they could feel the tremendous pressure on their bodies. Toto seemed to be protected by Mr. Vile's magic, and Mofusen had cast a barrier. Cannon moved on to Ralph's lap and cast the same magic as well, which made things a little better. Stan was perched on Ralph's shoulder. While Ralph knew they were moving at a great speed, he had no idea that they were about to finish a 1-month journey in merely 2 hours. We arrived. Look. Ralph was annoyed and exhausted, but he still managed to look out of the window. That apostrophe s. Horrible. I don't think it was the dragon's work. Toto was speechless. It looked like black wings were stretching out from the island to the sea. In fact, it was the hardened lava that had flowed out from the mines. As it was shining black, it clearly had metallic properties. For some reason, the golden city on the center of the island was fine, but the black wings in the sea still looked ominous. And then there was the gold dragon, flying around the top of the volcanic mountain. The gold lizard had thorns of ore on its back, and it flapped its wings while breathing fire. Sometimes, it would roar as the mountain erupted, and more lava flowed out. I won't forgive it. Nature could suddenly turn its fangs on you. But these kinds of disasters, which were triggered on purpose, were a different matter. Menu understood the horrors of earthquakes and tsunamis. After all, he had been born in such a place, and so he drove the carriage towards the dragon who was causing the disasters out of greed. Chapter 105, Summon. Hormakat. Gold Dragon. You idiot. Are you going to charge right in? As Menu lashed his whip from the driver's seat, Ralph grabbed him by the collar. The gold dragon looked at them once, but did nothing. It then returned to its patrol. Menu was thrown into the carriage, and then Ralph held him down. If you want to die, do it alone. I thought you came here to stop it. Menu's eyes quivered at Ralph's words. Anger had made him forget himself. Or he was taken by an urge. Why was he not able to control himself? As he wondered about this, he started to cool down. Is this Apex effect? If it was, the source of it should be nearby. It was no surprise that the gold dragon would go mad with greed. Menu slapped his cheeks with both hands. The pain cleared his mind just a little. I'm sorry. It seems like something is wrong with me. And so Menu passed the mystery masks to the other three. In other words, you just need to keep resisting it. Realizing what Menu meant, the other three quickly put on the masks. Summon, Yaya. Menu waved his staff and called Yaya. They nodded at each other, and then she began to sing in a loud voice. It was as if she was being dragged into Menu's madness, and she could not control her power. As for the other three, the masks allowed them to resist it. Otherwise, listening to the song at such close range would quickly put them to sleep. Menu grinned. It was working. And he was feeling better. Quietly, Menu continued to drive the carriage, while Yaya rode on top of the roof. The giant silhouette of the gold dragon came closer to them from below. It's so big. I'm reminded of it. Though, Mr. Vile was also big. Being the same size helps with maintaining balance. Indeed. It was as if strength and size were the same thing. There was something he realized through resisting as well. The influence of Apep was like a form of intoxication, so a physical punch was effective. Back when he was dealing with Mr. Vile, carving away at Mr. Vile had helped a little in bringing him back to his senses. Putting them under Menu's control was the best way to avoid being influenced. Well, as long as Menu stayed strong. If you want to punch something big, you should use something big. Menu stood up on the driver's seat, and began to move his brush over the sketchbook. Ralph stretched out his arms and supported him from behind, which allowed him to draw quickly, even as strong winds and dust from the volcano was blowing at him. Once the carriage was about as high as the clouds, he thanked Ralph and told him to let go. Then he took in a deep breath and exhaled. Could something so reckless work? He asked himself. However, there was no one here to reprimand him. Yes, no one could. And so he summoned him, who he had drawn as best as his imagination allowed. He threw down the sketchbook, and then swung his staff. The pages lit up, and a visible current of magic energy appeared. Summon. Hormakat. He looked just like a giant. However, he was a weapon without human warmth. With a pale face and golden wings, the weapon had a body marked with gold and blue lines. The humanoid thing appeared from within the clouds suddenly, and the other three watched with their mouths hanging open. Ralph. The carriage, please, Menu said, and then he jumped onto the giant's shoulder. The carriage shook violently. Menu landed and then ran towards the chest of the giant robo. And then he was sucked into the cockpit. Inside the cockpit, there was a screen with a full 360-degree angle. It was the type where his movements controlled the robot exactly. He was currently floating up in the air. To the left, he detected Ralph and the others inside of the carriage. Ralph instinctively recognized the danger, and quickly moved the carriage away. Far enough from the humanoid thing, but close enough to still see the gold dragon. Menu was relieved by this, and then he used the wings that sprouted from the robot's head, to beat the air and charge straight towards the dragon. It was part plunge and part flight. He approached in this reckless manner, and then swung. Hormakat's arms moved in sync with Menu's, and the fist slammed into the dragon. The gold dragon was thrown into the sea, causing a great splash. For a second, it did not understand what had happened. After pulling its singing body out of the water, and returning to the sky, it finally saw the thing that had struck him down. What is that? Isn't that cheating? A giant humanoid of metal that had wings coming out of its head. It was beautiful, with a streamlined shape, but it had cold eyes that looked at the gold dragon. Upon hearing this question, Menu excitedly posed. His right hand was placed on his chest, and his other limbs were extended. Allow me to explain. Hormakat is the humanoid divine robot that Horistan drove in the last battle against Osiris in flying. Horistan. If Sekar were here, he would have scolded Menu and told him that no one here would understand that reference. Unfortunately, he was not present. That is not what I'm talking about, the gold dragon shouted, and then it flew up and unleashed its breath. Harua's shield. Menu raised his left hand, and the sun-shaped shield of light appeared dispersed the breath. You still haven't returned to your senses? Oh, well. Menu moved even closer to the dragon, and then pulled it as he flew up into the air. And like that, he slammed it down into the water. And then he kicked the dragon in the face. Gah! Let's go. Let's go. Hormakat of the Dawn. Menu's robot spread out its arms and legs wide, and then the wings stood up, and the balls at its joints started to glow and gather in front of the cockpit. And then an ultra-heat ray shot out and burned the dragon's wings. Ah, damn it. This time, it would not be able to get out by itself. Menu hurriedly approached the tattered dragon, and caught it right before it fell into the sea. What was I doing? Have you regained your senses? Sorry for doing this to you. The sight of the dragon, spreading out its wings over the sea, would capture the imagination of the people of El Dorado, and become a new deity to worship. Hormakat. That was the name they heard. And word of it would spread in the blink of an eye. Chapter 106, and the threat was gone. While carrying the gold dragon, which had lost its wings, Menu returned quietly to the carriage. After that, a meeting commenced in order to decide what should be done. As for me, I could absorb the magma that flowed out. Though, it would be difficult to do with this body. The golden dragon said hesitantly. She now looked like a lizard encrusted with large gemstones. There was something wrong with me. I feel scared to stay in this land, but I have nowhere else that I can go. After hearing her side of the story, Menu and the others turned to each other. Menu could tell that the dragon was not lying, as he had experienced the same thing once. And so he could not just leave her here. Master, why not make her a familiar, like you did with me? That would be fine. But if I made a new body, I don't think the carriage would be able to carry us. What about relying on El Dorado? That is the last thing I want to do. After all, no matter how you look at it, the thing that made her go mad was from El Dorado. Well, it could also be the port town. And it must be from Apep's henchmen. In that case, it would be easier to move on the island. It would be like a summer bug flying into the fire. Oh? If you need a body, there is a perfect one right here. Huh? The gold dragon's sharp nails pointed at the Hormakat, which was carrying her. This is made from electrum, a receptor for powerful energy. If you link it to your body and use this metal doll to collect elements, it will be incredibly fast. For Menu, it was something that he didn't mind erasing. After all, it was a weapon. He could not just hand it over to a dragon without condition, considering the dragon had been mad and destroying things just a moment ago. He quickly looked at Mofusen, Ralph, and Toto. However, no one else had any ideas. If you become my familiar, I will agree. Of course. Also, I have a request to that cute kid over there. Could you return me to the earth as well? She was talking about Toto. Apparently, she knew about the situation surrounding Mr. Vile. Because I went wild like that, the gold divine beast used a lot of energy in order to quell it. If I return to the earth, then I can give energy to the divine beast. Please do it. And then the gold dragon whispered to Menu, explaining to him alone what kind of power it was. If I am in the earth, I will not be able to move, even when affected. And as long as I'm yours to command, the mind used to control this doll will not be contaminated. I do not want to go crazy again. Upon hearing this, and being assured that the gold dragon was not lying, Menu turned to Toto. Could you do it then? Also, Mr. Vile, please lend me some energy. Certainly, I would be glad to be of use. It's decided then, Menu declared, and then he emerged from the Hormakat cockpit and held up his staff, and the gold dragon chanted the blessed verse. I hereby pledge to serve Summoner Menu, and respond to his call, journeying to the ends of the earth. In answer to the call of gold, I shall traverse 1,000 miles. Now, decide the name that will bind me. From today forth, you shall be Bergwerk. The contract is made. Light poured from the dragon's body and entered the staff. She was now his familiar. And she took a great chunk of energy with her. But since he was still able to maintain the Hormakat and the carriage, he must have plenty of energy left. After Menu climbed into the carriage, he then moved Bergwerk's consciousness into the Hormakat. Bergwerk opened and closed her hands in order to check the sensation, and then she nodded. When entering the carriage, Menu had seen that Ralph's eyes were shining, but he pretended not to notice. Apparently, Ralph thought robots were cool as well. The rest is Toto's job. But I'll help. Toto and Mr. Val climbed onto the Hormakat's arm, and then Bergwerk flew over to one of the volcanic mountains. Then she rose up into the air, so that they had a view of the entire island. This whole island is my territory. As my body is starting to melt, fix me to this place before I disappear. Toto stood on the Hormakat's hand, while in the back, Menu and Mr. Val put their hands down and prepared to send the magic energy. From Toto, who had set up the alchemy magic circle, a torrent of energy surged out. It seemed that his magic had increased without Menu noticing. And so Menu did not have to use much. Unite! Toto shouted, and the entire island glowed with a brilliant gold color. That should be the end of it. His body swayed, and Menu had to support him. Both were quite tired. Toto, that was amazing. You did it with your own power alone. Toto laughed weakly. And then after muttering about being happy, he closed his eyes and was unconscious. Well, I will now use this body to take care of the things that I have done. I'm sorry for causing so much trouble. You can summon Baruchan whenever you want. Baruchan. There had been something quite cool about her, and it turned out she had even thought of a cute nickname. After saying farewell to the giant robot, they returned to Ramstrasse in the Pegasus carriage. As they arrived in the evening, when no one was around, they landed quietly behind the church and then went inside. They then made a full report to Sekka. I am very disappointed that I was not able to see the mysterious machine that made an appearance in episode 11 of Flying Horistan, Sekka said to them before leaving into the sky. That was a strange part to be disappointed by. But Menu just chuckled. Perhaps next time he would make a figure for Sekka. We should go too. Before we get pulled into something else. Not to the inn, but that they should return to Solcia. Once they reunited with Gara at the inn, and told her that they would be leaving tomorrow morning. There were no preparations that needed to be made, Menu added as he checked their supplies. That day, the four of them slept peacefully. No, there was one platinum-haired warrior who was too excited to sleep, and kept muttering the name of the giant robot and dragon. However, Menu felt that it would be unkind to point this out. Chapter 107 Ellie's escort request. The comfortable journey by carriage ended peacefully, and they arrived in Solcia. As for Menu, he wondered if he would be scolded again, now that the dust had settled. However, it seemed that the mystery masks, and the tension of the situation, helped him to avoid this fate. We're back. Menu poked his head out of the carriage window and looked at the town of Solcia. The port town was as lively as usual. Well, maybe a little more lively than before. Ah. The adventurers must have returned, said Kara. Menu's eyes lit up at this. Oh, so if we go to the guild, there might be requests, Ralph said with a nod. But first, they returned to the Merchants Guild with the carriage. Kara went inside, and then came out with Ling. Before saying anything to Menu and the others, she inspected the carriage and then let out a deep sigh. What did you do? This was made to carry luggage. We can't sell it to nobles. I suppose you can buy it from us? Apparently, this is where the scolding was to start. Menu had lowered his guard, and so he could do nothing but scratch his head and chuckle awkwardly. While it would not hurt to have it, he did not want to look after the horses. If we could talk about this. HMPH. I suppose you can't take care of the horses. Fine. I will arrange it so that you can drop them off at any Merchants Guild in any town. They will care for the horses for you. It was deal. While Menu did feel a little cheated, he was the one who had altered it with magic, so he could not complain. And while he could change the carriage back to normal, it wasn't as if he needed to put anything in it. And it was better to not show off his powers even more. Still, as they would have to look after the horses while on the road, they were given a quick lesson on what to do, as well as some hay. Thankfully, Mofusen had some familiarity with horses. He had once been a farmer, after all. After finishing their business at the Merchants Guild, it was evening. And so they headed to the Adventurers Guild. Oh, it's Menu. Some new work has come in. Great. What kind? He had become friends with the old man who worked at the guild. During the time he sold a lot of crystals. The job that came in was to work as an escort. And it was to the water capital of Jupno, which Menu had wanted to go to. That country was known for having many dungeons, including an ancient dungeon that was similar to the one that Kanon had been in. Menu had discovered this when he was bored, and did some research in a library. If it was an escort mission, they would be able to make use of the carriage. As the client would be staying in Jupno for some time, they only had to escort them there. And this seemed like a good opportunity to leave the town. They accepted a few other B-rank hunting quests, and then promised to meet up with the client on the following day. After that, they left the guild building. And then the next day. What? You people are going to be my guards? Miss Ellie? This was a most unexpected reunion. Apparently she was going to do some field research in order to see how the war was affecting the scarabs. And so she needed guards to protect her. Well, if it's you, I suppose there is no need to worry. This is much better than total strangers. Menu was not sure about that. Also, it seemed that in this country, women did not seem to mind traveling with men. Miss Ellie, wouldn't you rather be guarded by a more mixed group? Why? Scarabs are more likely to do something funny to me than any of you. Obviously, she was quite right. But Menu was starting to wonder if there was something in his status that made people sure of this. You all went to Ramsteris, didn't you? Everyone knows that friends of God do not run towards impure things. Ralph nodded. So they were being seen as fanatical believers. Well, it was convenient. Menu wished that he had bought some amulets of protection. That way, he could make a show of being devout. All right then. Thank you for having us, Miss Ellie. Just call me Ellie. Now, mind if we confirm the route? They then looked at the map, and made plans for their departure early the next morning. The route would take them through Nadar and towards Jupno, but they would be off the main road by quite a lot. Indeed, you wanted of guards with you for that. In the afternoon, Menu and the others went out to buy supplies. Ellie still had some work left to do, so she promised to see them in front of the guild tomorrow. When they told the innkeeper that they would be leaving, he gave them back. Chapter 108, Fieldwork Hindrance. Ellie's work involved observing the movement and numbers of scarabs at several different points. And so they traveled by carriage between these points. She was surprised by how comfortable the carriage was at first, but she quickly grew used to it, and just quietly looked through documents while traveling. She was very passionate about her work. Menu, Ralph and Mofusen took turns driving and watching the road from behind. As the Knights Guild and adventurers hunted roadside monsters quite regularly, it was mostly safe. However, they were not on the main road this time. It was a journey where monster attacks were quite possible. In fact, they encountered monsters 3 times before arriving at the first point. Still, they defeated it without ever being in danger, and they arrived right on time. I shall go into the forest, but I want someone to come with me. And so Menu and Ralph went with her into the forest. Thanks to the cooperation of the Adventurers Guild, they knew the average encounter rate for scarabs. While walking down a beaten path, Ellie took detailed notes of the number of scarabs she saw, as well as their state. How strange, Ellie muttered with a serious expression, when they were at the halfway point. What is it? There are so many of them. There should not be this many. Is there a spawner nearby? Apparently, when a spawner appeared deep in the forest, the number of scarabs would temporarily increase. This was because there were more creatures, and excrement. However, they had not encountered many monsters yet. They walked to the gathering place, and Ellie continued to mutter about how something was odd. As for Menu, he was quite popular with the scarabs. They would always approach him while rolling a ball of dung. As he had the language skill, he could mostly understand what they were saying. You can roll me anytime. It's not like I came here for you or anything. For you, this dung ball. No, never mind. They all seemed a little embarrassed. However, Menu did not tell Ellie what they were saying, as he knew it would just make her jealous again. Though, if he could trade places with her, he would do so very willingly. How strange. Well, let's go back then. Menu guessed that he was the reason that there were more than usual but he couldn't say it. And so he was silent on the trip back. Of course, it wasn't as if he was sure about it yet. However, he could confirm it on the next trip. If it turned out that Menu's presence was affecting the number of scarab encounters, then this escort mission was a failure. We should inspect this point again tomorrow. If their numbers have increased, then I need to find out the reason. At night, Ellie continued to passionately go through her documents by the fire. As for the others, it had already been decided that Toto and Mofusen would accompany her tomorrow. This was because, judging by the monsters, they had determined that it would be safe for Toto to go. More than anything, they had to take Menu off from escort duties. As for Menu, he desperately hoped that he was not the actual reason for the abnormality, because staying with the horses was very boring. It was with that wish that he went to sleep that night. As he knew about the effect of Toto's anti-monster potion, Menu had gone to sleep without putting anyone on watch duty. However, 2 pairs of eyes were watching from a hill deep in the forest. Damn it! Someone has come. They will never find us. They won't come this far. You never know. After all, a scarab researcher is with them. When there are this many, it is difficult to hide. They wore tattered robes of red and white. It was Argus and Sangus of the Wind Clan, the 2 culprits from Museria, who had captured Toto. But if they find us by chance, Sangus muttered, and then a giant figure walked up to them from behind. It looked like a kobold, but it was much larger. It was like a giant wolf that stood up on its hind legs. It is your turn, summon Argus. I know. The figure moved towards Argus and rested its chin on his shoulder. It wore a muzzle and its legs were chained. Also, it had glowing red eyes. Argus petted the monster's neck as he watched Menu and the others. Eventually, he stood up, and along with the monster and Sangus, disappeared deep into the forest. Chapter 109, Durable and Long-Lasting. On the following day, the results showed that the scarabs had increased in number after all. Menu was secretly happy. It was not his fault then. There was some other reason. Ralph realized what was happening and gave him a piercing look, but Menu ignored it. I guess we will have to go deeper then. In that case, it would be best for Menu and Ralph to be your guards. The sun was still high in the sky. And so Ellie took Ralph and Menu and headed deeper into the forest. On the way, Menu spoke secretly to a scarab. Hey, is something happening inside of the forest? And then his eyes widened at the reply. Slave hunting. More humans and monsters now. So there are more of us too. In other words, in spite of everything they had done, the Wind Clan was still active. And more monsters as well. What had caused that? Perhaps he should tell Ellie about this. It was dangerous, and they should go back. Even if it made Ellie jealous, it was better than putting her in danger. Ellie, what? During their break, he spoke to her in a serious voice while she was drinking water. Please don't be mad at me. The truth is I can speak with scarabs. Wait. Why are you just boasting? I asked them what is happening now. Apparently, it is slave hunting. I think they went deeper into the forest during the fighting. Ellie was stunned. Slave, those without rights, who lived only to be used by the rich. It was not forbidden in Nedar, but greatly frowned upon, and so they were rarely seen in the city. However, it was true that in some rich mansion, there were those treated as being lower than servants. Ellie, it's dangerous here. Let's go back to the carriage. Ralph and I will handle this. I see. And the increased scarabs. It's because of the fighting. Ellie's hands shook as she took notes. Cold sweat dripped down. What was making her this scared? On the journey back, Ellie told them her story. I happen to be a half-elf, the offspring of a slave mother and a rich man. Menu had noted how inhumanly beautiful she looked. So it was because she was half-elf. However, my mother's slave friends helped in a deception, and I alone was able to escape. I hid in the back of a farmer's wagon, which was visiting the mansion. After that, I was raised by Grandpa and Grandma in the countryside, without knowing anything. It was only when she left the village that she learned the true horrors of her birth. They had told her, even if she was a half-elf, she would still have a high value, and must be careful. Why do elves always get targeted? Menu had no idea. Ellie looked tense at this question. Because, Menu, I will answer that. Ralph interrupted. He gave her a concerned look and then turned to Menu. Because elves live longer and are tougher. Also, they are pretty. Elves had high magic energy and strong internal organs. And even if they were not great at lifting heavy things, they could heal when injured, and lived long lives. On the other hand, while humans had more strength, they were weak and did not last as long. Menu felt the rage well up inside of him. Ellie, I'm so sorry for asking you. Wait at the carriage. Mofusson and Toto are strong, so you will be safe with them. He smiled and took her to the carriage. And after explaining the situation to the other two, he said, I'm going to go and crush them. And then he turned on his heels. As he spoke so casually, both Mofusson and Toto had to stop him frantically. It is dangerous. You'll be going up against so many, said Toto, and Mofusson nodded. They are an organization. Professionals. Are you sure that you can deal with them? I've already crushed them once, he answered. Except for Ralph, the others all looked stunned. I had meant to do a thorough job, so they would never do it again. But it looks like I was too soft. From now on, I will crush them whenever I find them. Do not stop me. There was a part of Menu that could accept that some societies were different. Perhaps it was because there were limits to what he could do alone, and he did not see himself as some kind of savior. However, once he had learned the reason that a person could have their life taken away from them, it was different. As long as he was able, he wanted to help those in reach. He had that much sense of justice at least. It might sound a little half-hearted, but there was no turning back now. What Menu is saying is true. And he even gave an elf tribe the ability to fight. Perhaps these ones will also be freed soon. But, the scarabs said that there are more monsters now as well. The burden might be too heavy for the elves. That is why I will go, and if they were slave hunting, then there would be scouts as well. They might know that Menu was here. After all, they were in a relatively open camp. So they could be targeted. Summon, Yaya. Menu handed Mofusson and Toto the mystery masks, and then he left Yaya to guard them. Now, even if the carriage was attacked, Ellie would be asleep, and not have to see the terrible sight. He told Ellie to stay inside of the carriage, and then had Mofusson, Toto, Cannon and Mr. Val protect it from outside. Ralph knew how quietly angry Mofusson was. Like the first time their swords clashed, he was chillingly calm, but under the layer of ice, there was magma. Ralph, if you saw someone in front of you, whose life was ruined because they were durable and long-lasting, I would have to help them, right? I'm glad. We will do it thoroughly this time as well. Stan was on his shoulder, and cried in agreement. Chapter 110, A Difficult Job. Being a summoner was not a popular profession. It was hardly anyone's first choice. However, such people did exist. After all, if you were born with a lot of magic energy, then you had great potential as a summoner. It was the same with necromancers. Indeed, it was only those with average magic energy that were not suited to the job. But if you had a lot, it could be a rare weapon. That being said, such rare powers were often desired by those who would use it for evil. After all, the true power could be used without restraint that way. It was very unfortunate. Sangus and Argus were such people. Before they joined the Wind Clan, people would often look down on them just because of their occupation. They were underestimated. And they would be considered lucky if that was all. However, sometimes, they would be treated like slaves from other party members. Or they would not be allowed to join at all. Still, they had the ability and talent. Too much to think of switching occupations. They had to figure out a way to make the most of what they had. And so they began to take more dangerous jobs. And like that, it did not take long for them to be welcomed by the Wind Clan. They wore robes with tattered sleeves. It was like a silent vow that they would never return to that horrible situation again. Do it, Mayuta. In answer to Argus's order, the giant kobold attacked Dorum. With the help of the scarabs, Menu and the others had reached the village where the elves were held. And it was there that they faced Argus and Sangus, who were acting as guards. While it was a reunion of sorts, it was Menu's first time meeting Argus. Menu had swiftly summoned Dorum in order to fight, but Argus's monster was also named. Regardless, the ensuing battle was vicious. In the meantime, Sangus faced off with Ralph. He used various magic attacks to try and keep Ralph at bay. The sounds of battle tore through the quietness of the night forest. Currently, it was difficult to see who had the advantage. But that would likely not last long. In the back, there was the elf prison, which was being protected by a barrier master. Menu was focused on reaching it. I already used the medjed. What can I do that will leave an impression? He had made quite a scene the last time in order to send out a message. However, it had not been very effective. In that case, he had to do more. Make them know that it was not worth attacking the elves. Even while Menu faced the blank page of his sketchbook, Durham and Nayuta continued to fight. While Argus was too focused on it, Menu just sat down on the ground and scratched his head with the pen. Ridiculous. Argus felt a chill go down his spine. He knew he was talented enough to control such a monster. And yet this was difficult work. The man sitting in front of him was clearly on a different level. It made Argus so mad that he became determined to win this no matter what. On the other hand, Menu hardly noticed Argus. Well, he did care about how things were going. It was just that the elves were his top priority. Alright. I'll go with this then. He finally decided. Menu started to draw something huge inside the sketchbook. Just helping them was not enough. They had to be given a way to fight as well. And since this was their symbol, it would surely be an effective power. Menu raised the sketchbook up into the air. Medjed. Summon. The book began to glow brightly. Even Ralph and Sangus turned their heads to look. Durham detected the danger and jumped back. But Nayuta would not move without Argus's order, and so he was crushed under Medjed's foot. A giant Medjed now stood there, several times taller than the trees. What there? Argus was too stunned to do anything but mutter. Nayuta had been crushed in an instant. And Argus did not have the strength to summon him again. You too. Would you consider surrendering now and releasing the elves? Menu asked. It was either that or annihilation. The giant Medj took one step forward. Sangus and Argus looked at Menu dumbly. Brother. I. Was wrong. What the hell are you talking about? Actual talent. Is this kind of power. That can surpass any notions of unfairness or believability. Argus said weakly. Sangus raised an eyebrow. That is not talent. That is a monster. I wish I were a monster. Argus then raised his hands. It meant they surrendered. We surrender. We will be leaving immediately. So do as you wish. Menu tilted his head. By the way, I'm giving this monster to the elves. Will you attack them again? That is not our decision. But we'll make a report. Fine. Get out of here in 1 minute. What's your name? Argus did not expect an answer. Menu thought about it for a moment and answered. I'd like to stay anonymous. Argus gritted his teeth. He realized Menu was the person who had caused the incident in Museria. In that case, they had no chance. I'll remember that. After that, Argus, Sangus and the others of the Wind Clan scattered like spiders. The giant Medj then broke the prison that held the elves, and Menu was showered with praise. He told the elves about Manak, and sent them away, along with the giant. 50 out of 100, said Ralph. Menu laughed. No, it's 20. It was a repeat. But they sure were strong. Menu had been in a hurry. Had he more time to work his imagination, he might have come up with a different solution. But Argus had been too strong for that. I almost felt sorry for those brothers. I see that you are still too soft. But I like it. Sometimes, Menu had a very strange look in his eyes, like a child who destroys an ant nest. But that had not happened this time. Much to Ralph's relief, I helped the elves, but the mask broke, and they saw me. It really is a 20. It's fine, once in a while. And you can easily fight them off if they attack. It was unusual for Menu to seem depressed. And so Ralph did his best to encourage him. But he was also happy to see this human side. And so he continued to console Menu as they made their way back. By the time they arrived at the carriage, it was already night time. Chapter 111, Water Capital Jupno. After staying at the first observation point for a few days, the number of scarabs fell at a steady rate. Apparently, many of them had scattered until the population returned to normal. Had that not happened, it could have resulted in a stampede, which would have been very terrible indeed. And so Menu felt quite relieved as he and the others headed to the next observation point. There were 15 points in all, but things went smoothly after that, and they were able to visit 2 to 3 spots a day. As they were closer to an old battlefield, the numbers tended to be a little higher or lower than usual. Regardless, it was about 20 days later when they finally arrived in Jupno. Ultimately it was a long journey that took nearly a month. As soon as they arrived in Jupno, they headed to the Adventures Guild. This was so they could make a quest completion report while Ellie was present. They also converted the crystals into money. It was not good to store those. Thank you so much for your help. I wish I could hire you for the trip back as well. But I know that you're busy. I will just hitch a ride on some wagon, Ellie said, and paid them extra. Let's meet again, Ellie. By then, I hope that I will be able to speak with scarabs as well. Menu and Ellie shook hands firmly. Just then, the doors of the guild opened, and they turned to look. Oh, if it isn't Menu. Seti. Now this was quite a coincidence. Menu then introduced her to Ellie and Mofusson. Thanks to Seti's personality, she fitted in with the others immediately. Ellie, you sure talk a lot. That was Seti for you. She wasted no time in blurting out what everyone was thinking, but would not say, eh? No, this is quite normal for me. I never really thought about it. Ahaha. You have quite an accent too. But I like it. Seti, are you also? I came here on my way to Capriccio. And I was just thinking about gathering more members. So I'll let you join me. Great. Thank you, Seti. Cannon looked pleased. However, Ellie had a serious expression. Capriccio. Do you mean the ancient dungeon? Yes. Are you interested too, Ellie? No. My hands are full with the scarabs already. But I am pretty sure the dungeon was sealed off 20 years ago. Eh? Menu and Seti were surprised. You should ask someone here for details. I better get going. If you ever need anything, come to the Farmers Guild. They might be able to help. Ellie said, leave the stunned Menu and Seti. She then exited the door of the building. As they did not want to go as a large group, Menu and Seti represented the others and went to the counters. There, they got an explanation that lined up with what Ellie had said. It hasn't functioned as a dungeon for 23 years. Instead, it's been seen as some kind of strange trial. But after 3 years, when the number of people who returned was less than half, they decided to close it. If you want to take on the challenge, then you will have to speak with the guild master. And the guild master was currently busy taking care of things after the war. We will do anything to help. Could you somehow make time for us? I will send a message on your behalf. Please come again tomorrow. As they had no choice, they returned to the others and explained what had happened. Well, we will just come back tomorrow then, said Mofusson. If he is busy with the war, then there is nothing we can do. But then again, perhaps we can help with some of the work. Indeed. Though, there is something that is bothering me, so I will go and do some research later, said Toto and Ralph. Menu and Seti had been so enthusiastic about going, but there was nothing that they could do. And so they promised to meet up with her tomorrow morning, and then they went out to get rooms at an inn. That was when they finally got a good look at the city. Wow! There is a boat running through the city. Water roads ran in every direction, and narrow boats. Gondolas were moving in great numbers. It really was beautiful. The buildings were painted in various colors, and there were bridges in different places. Some of the gondolas sold food. It was easy to see that they were the main mode of transport in the city. You can ride on them over there. Ho ho. Let's go and look. Well, we may not be able to find an inn if we don't ride one. Most of the guilds were concentrated around the city entrance. Of course, the Merchants Guild was there as well. It was probably so that newcomers would not get lost. They left their carriage at the guild, and then they got into a gondola. A young, muscular man in a sailor uniform rowed the boat. His name was Artie, and after they made the request, he agreed to take them to an inn. And while they initially meant to part ways after that, he then offered to be their boatman for the rest of the day. And so they gladly accepted. So after the inn, you want to go around and visit different stores, and then I take you to the library? As they had not eaten yet, they would get some food, and then Ralph would visit the library. If I have to wait long, that means I get to rest. But don't worry, I'll work hard when I have to, Artie said. And then he took them to the inn that he recommended. The inn above the water had a calm, homely atmosphere. Dry flowers hung from the wall and had a mild fragrance. It's my family's inn. We have the best food in the city. He was very blunt. While it was clear he was not unbiased, it was doubtful that he would outright lie to customers. Besides, they liked the atmosphere of the inn. A kind-looking woman then came out, who was Artie's wife, and they took 4 rooms and received permission to use one as an atelier. And then they returned to the boat. Artie was a businessman in a tourist location. He knew not to pry into their personal affairs, and focused on being a guide and boasting about his home. They knew that there was no way the food that he recommended would be bad. As they had been traveling, most of the food they had to cook by themselves. And so Menu and the others enjoyed eating out for the first time in a while. Chapter 112, Assigned to Miscellaneous Tasks. The next day, Menu and the others met up with Seti in front of the Adventurers Guild again. And with some excitement, they went inside. They were swiftly taken to the back. However, it was like entering a battlefield. Not enough documents. Not enough inspectors. Send some employees over here. There are only E.O.D. adventurers left. Look for something above C. The Farmers Guild is rushing us, and we don't have enough to support the Knights Guild either. Where are the soldiers from the capital? There were piles of books and documents on the desks, and the people were shouting and screaming everywhere. In a corner, there were dirty dishes stacked into a mountain. It did not smell very good. After passing this and entering a room in the back, there was an extravagant desk with engravings, and a man was sitting hunched over it. He was in his 40s. Oh, there you are. Welcome to the Jupino Adventurers Guild. As you can see, we have a desperate lack of personnel now. So we are glad to have you, he said while scratching his forehead with the tip of a pen. He had red hair that was cut short and wore a wrinkled uniform. Even when sitting, it was clear that he was tall and muscular. Surely someone like that should be on the road instead of behind a desk. Still, he did have the aura you would expect from a guild master. I am Van, the guild master here. Things have not been going well after the war. If you are willing to help, I will give you permission to go to Capriccio. What do you say? He was quick. And since this is exactly what Manu and the others wanted, they all nodded. Right now, what we lack is inspectors for the farmlands and monster hunters. Also, the wounded soldiers need to be treated. Cleanliness management as well. The low-rank adventurers help as well, but they lack experience. As for mid to high-rank adventurers, they have all left, as there are no lucrative jobs. As for the monsters, we asked help from the medical guild, but they are busy with healing soldiers. Besides, tens of thousands of people were here and ate food before leaving. The town is in a desperate state. Look. Just solve one of these problems within a week. They all turned to look at Menu. He folded his arms and looked at the ceiling. After thinking for a moment, he opened his mouth. You. Only one? Van raised an eyebrow at this. He was amused. After chuckling, he spread out his arms. Well, if you could deal with all of it, we would be able to operate as normal again. He said this as if it was an impossible dream. By the way, why is the Adventurers Guild doing it? Because there is no one else. Due to the war being so sudden, adventurers made up a third of the Nadar army, and so they held some of the responsibility afterwards. The country had paid them well too. However, it was taking a long time to send out the soldiers. After all, there had been a lot of objections towards the war, and many of the soldiers were kept near the capital, for protection and to avoid civil war. I see. So we will be acting by accepting requests from the Adventurers Guild then. We will accept those 3 jobs. Can you really do it? Van looked at Menu doubtfully. Menu folded his arms again and thought about it. And then he nodded. First, Toto and I will go and treat the wounded soldiers. As for the battlefield inspection, Mofusen and Seti can do that. Ralph will check the monsters. I think we should be able to manage. He gave out the orders and then turned to Van and declared clearly that they would get it done. Not dry. They would do it. Van suspected that Menu was overconfident with regards to his own ability. We will do it in 1 week. So please make preparations so that we can go to Capriccio. I will be waiting. But I won't expect much. Van sighed. He was sure that he was wasting his time with these people. And like that, he waved his hand so that they would leave him. After being driven out of the room, they got to work at once. Cannon would go with Ralph. Stan with Mofusen and Seti. And Mr. Vile would go with Menu and Toto. All of them were sure that it would be done. And so their feet were not especially heavy or light. Menu would do it in 3 days. There was no panic or stress. No matter how much the guild master may doubt it, it was not arrogance. They just knew. After all, they had witnessed it many times already. And so they left the guild and went their separate ways. Without saying a word. Chapter 113, At the field hospital for wounded soldiers, Menu and Toto headed to a wooden building that was a short distance away from the place that had formerly been a battlefield. As it was a place to treat thousands of people, there was nothing else in the area. There were a few large tents near the building where people were being rested. It had been about 1 month since the war. They were then welcomed by a member of the medical guild. Apparently, they were quite desperate for help. After being taken to a room, the current situation was explained to them. The most badly wounded people were kept inside of the building. And while they had about 100 people on staff, it was not enough. They had run out of healing potions a long time ago, and were currently making do with magic. But when it came to recovery of magic energy, food and sleep was a necessity. And they could seem to keep up with the demand. If we had anything above mid-level potions, we would be able to heal most of the people in the tents. As for the people in the buildings, we would want high-level potions. But there is not enough supply, even if we have the money to pay for them. And we lack personnel. Menu and Toto looked at each other and whispered, "If we combined my potions with the ones I gave you, Mr. Menu. It should be enough. If we only have high-level potions, we could dilute them so there is enough for everyone. Also, I will go around and cast healing magic on the people in the building." They raised their heads after deciding this. And then they took out the potions from the pouch and Mr. Vile. The guild worker looked at them in astonishment. What is this? Our personal stock. They are all high-level potions. And so this alchemist here will look at the wounded and district them accordingly. Can you have someone guide me? I am not too bright when it comes to medicine. And so I would need someone to tell me how much is needed. But I can make more potions if it is necessary. The person in charge looked at them as if looking at God. And he had tears in his eyes. With these potions, the situation would change considerably. They had been working day and night for over a month. And yet now, it looked like things would change in an instant. I will help to treat the heavily wounded. I am sure that all of you are tired, so please rest. Oh, this was quite a saving hand. While I am using my magic, you should all rest. In fact, it would be best for me if you all kept your distance. No, but within the building, there were nearly 1,000 patients. And yet he was acting like he could treat all of them himself. I can use healing magic, but I do not belong to the medical guild. Please take that into consideration. But we do not want any more of them to die. This war had already resulted in protests from the people. More death would only make things worse. Toto then opened his mouth. You can trust Mr. Menu. Please don't worry about it. He was the alchemist who had given them this mountain of medicine. Menu and the man stared at each other for a moment, and then he gave in. But if something happens, please call me. Yes, of course. Like that, they drove the guild worker out of the building. Menu then left the tents to Toto, while he went around the various rooms. From every corner, he heard the painful groans. Each room was in a terrible state. Thankfully, it was mostly clean, but the sight and smell was horrible. In other words, I just have to cast a powerful heal on these people. While generalized, it was the right answer. The magic of the tired guild workers was closer to low-level magic at this point. Some of the sleeping patients were missing arms and legs. Others had lost internal organs. It was all the others could do to keep them alive. And so Menu would use one powerful spell to change the situation all at once. After checking all of the rooms, he returned to the room where they had talked to the person in charge. He then closed his eyes, held up his staff, and created an image in his mind of the entire building. With heal, the effect changed depending on the amount of magic energy. After imaging the whole building being filled with energy, Menu cast a green magic circle that surrounded it all. Light unleashed from the magic circle, and then it spread out from the bottom to the top. High is not enough. Excellent. That kind of heal, Menu thought, and the light rose up even higher until it went over the roof of the building. Phew. He must have used 1/3 of his energy. Even Menu felt tired as he sat down and sighed. He wanted to go and looked at the others, but there were so many of them, and so he took out his sketchbook and drew 10 spirits that resembled floating eyeballs. And then after creating them, made them fly away to the other rooms. They went through the walls and ceilings and became Menu's eyes. After closing his eyes, he imagined that he was standing in front of 10 monitors, and in each monitor, he could see what the eyeballs were seeing. However, perhaps it was not necessary. I am healed. I am healed. I have arms. Look. I have arms. Ah, I thought that I would never walk again. But my legs are on the floor. He heard the voices from all over the building. Chapter 114, Don't read before eating. If there are people in a place, and they eat food, then will also defecate accordingly. In this world, there are servants from God called scarabs. And there were also sewage systems. However, things were different on a battlefield. And so the results were a lot of holes. When Seti and Mofusson arrived, a terrible sight awaited them. Mofusson immediately cast a barrier around the place that smelled. But when they got closer, they saw the low-ranking adventurers who worked there. Their shoes and trousers were covered in mud. Or possibly something worse. How horrible. Indeed, the situation had not improved for over a month. The battlefield was about 1 hour away from Jupno on foot. And the field hospital was about 20 minutes away. Here, the tents were pitched, the rear guard was stationed, and the vanguard fought. And in the front, spears rose majestically into the sky. But the fields and grasslands that were once between the tents and the spears had been trampled beyond recognition. As for the work being done by the dozens of adventurers, it was to endlessly fill up the holes. Mofusson and Seti did not have the ability to do anything about the situation. But they had to tell the others of the danger. If things were not processed carefully, it could lead to the spread of disease. Mofusson kneeled and picked up some of the dirt. His barriers protected him from disease, but not the smell. He brought it to his face and sniffed. It's weak. The soil? So burying it here will just ravage the land. Because all the plants were trampled and killed. There is not enough moisture, and the filth will spread. The young workers over there may become sick. And so Seti then approached one of the working parties and asked if any of them were feeling unwell. Ah, a few of the men who were here earlier. They went to the field hospital, as the medical guild is empty. Menu and Toto were there, so it should be fine. Thank you. You should go too if you feel sick, Seti said as she left them. The people she had talked to also had dry skin and hair, and looked pale. They could become ill at any moment. That was what she thought as she returned to Mofusson. It is a bigger emergency than I expected. Normally, I would want to just burn everything. But they already buried so much. These low-rank adventurers did not know how to process such filth. Mofusson had been the leader of a village, and had knowledge of living with large groups of people. Still, that was not enough to change this situation. We have no choice. We must wait for Menu. Stan, can you call him? Pi. The bird on Seti's shoulder raised one wing and replied. And then it flew off for the field hospital. Seti and Mofusson moved as far from the smell as they could, and then waited for Menu's arrival. He would surely be dealing with a difficult problem over there, and so they expected to wait for hours. However, Menu and Stan returned rather quickly. Hey! Did you wait long? Menu came with a cloth wrapped around his face. But he still scowled when he smelled the air. The stench must have come from Seti and Mofusson. It looks like the sickness has already started to spread. Indeed. And the soil is weak. So, what should we do? Merely filling up the holes will not be enough. First, we should till the entire land, burn it for sterilization, and if a light rain falls, that would be perfect. There was too much of a risk in drawing water from the town. That being said, if there was a landslide, it might result in toxic water flowing into the town. That's it? All right. I can do that. As always, you really do smell of money and danger. Huh? Smell? Already? Menu smelled himself just to make sure. You always smell. You're mean, Seti. I'll take a bath when I'm finished. Menu. How do you mean to till and burn so much area? Mofusson asked with a tilted head. I thought it could be managed with magic. Well, I suppose you could do it. He had forgotten for a moment of what had happened in the Valor Forest. But that place was even bigger than this battlefield. Seti smiled with interest and asked Mofusson what had happened. But they had more important matters right now. All right. Have the people working here come back for now. I need to prepare a little, and then I'll get to work, Menu declared, and Seti and Mofusson agreed. They then headed towards the scattered low-rank adventurers. In the meantime, Menu rode on Stan and rose up high into the air. Once he could view the whole battlefield, he held up his staff. From above, he could see that all of the adventurers had been evacuated. After seeing that Mofusson had cast a barrier, Menu unleashed his magic. First, till the ground with an earthquake. A brown magic circle appeared, but it was too large for Mofusen to even see. An earthquake erupted, causing the ground to be lifted upwards. The adventurers panicked, and had to be calmed by Mofusen and Seti. The ground moved as if alive. Soil, filth and dead grass merges and rippled like ocean waves. That should do it. Next, I'm supposed to burn. Firewall. After about 10 minutes, the ground stopped shaking. And then a layer of fire spread out over it. Not red flames. It was white hot as it burned the ground, and while the whole area should have been scorching, the adventurers did not feel the heat. Mofusen had done his job well. And lastly, rain. Shower. After the flames vanished, many used the magic that had been very useful during their past journey. Lukewarm water rained down from the sky. White steam rose from the hot ground as it accepted the rain. It must have poured for about 20 minutes. Strangely, this too did not hit Mofusen and the others. After all of this, Menu returned to the ground looking rather tired. Mofusen then picked up some of the soil and inspected it. While it would take time, it was good soil again, and crops would be able to grow. Chapter 115, Battlefield Stampede. Ralph borrowed a horse from the Merchant's Guild and went scouting for monsters. With cannon on his head, he went around the battlefield and towards the giant spears that Menu had made. In the corner of his vision, he could see the terrible sight of the Hahinov plains. But he knew that Menu would do something about that. There was a reason that the nearby villages and settlements had not been able to recover after the war. It was the presence of monsters. They had appeared in places where the fighting had been especially bad, and it was just a matter of time before they started attacking the settlements. And so for now, it was not farmers, who were good at taking care of fields, but adventurers, who tended to the land. As for why Ralph headed to the center of the fighting immediately, it was because monsters were threatened when fighting humans gathered together in one place. Getting rid of a threat was only natural. And so they appeared there. As this war had been an invasion, it was easy to figure out where the outbreak point was. Since the war had attracted so much criticism already, it was necessary to fight in an honorable and fair manner. Therefore, the Nadar army had arranged themselves neatly into camps, rear, and front line. And they followed a strict schedule. The war would begin with the morning bell, followed by a retreat and rest period, and at night, they slept in their camps. They would never engage in nighttime battles. It was also decided that their clashes with the Magickagia forces would occur near the border. Even if there was no justice in starting the war, as long as they put on a show of justice, people would follow. With all of that considered, it was easy to surmise that the location that had the most humans would be around the border, where both armies clashed. Ralph had been riding down the road towards Magickagia, but as the number of monsters increased, he moved over to the coast. Once he was close to the spears, he dismounted from his horse and crawled through the tall grass. Near Menu's spears, he saw a dark horde. Humanoid monsters like goblins and skeletons. They brandished weapons as well. Ralph sighed with relief, as their scouting ability was very limited in range. There could be more than 10,000 of them. And while he had no idea what they planned to do, they were still a threat when in these numbers. A stampede then. Even someone as strong as Ralph would not be able to handle it. An abnormal outbreak of monsters. As there were clearly too many, he determined that it must be a stampede. If it was, the aggressiveness of individual monsters would also be higher. He decided to withdraw quietly before they saw him. And so he climbed back onto his horse and made his way back. While riding, he thought about what he had seen. If that was a stampede that had occurred due to the soldiers gathered on the battlefield, then where would they be headed? Without an outlet, anger was something that just kept on growing. And so there must be a reason that a horde so large continued to stay in one place, instead of going down to one of the human settlements. Could it be? A chilling thought came to Ralph's mind as he rushed on. When he returned to the Adventurers Guild, he saw that Menu, Toto, Mofusen and Seti had not returned yet. He thought of rushing to the hospital building, but it would be no good if he accidentally passed them on the way. And so he waited patiently. Just as the sun started to set, the others returned. "Ah, you're already back, Ralph. How was it?" "It's bad, Menu. This town will be attacked." "What?" Menu had been ready to relax after a hard day's work, and so this was quite a surprise. But though he was sleepy from magic energy loss, he joined the others as they looked at a map. "The monster horde is gathering around the border, here. I didn't see any other monsters on the way, so monsters from other areas must be gathering at this point as well. Horde. That's strange. I flew over that area during the day and did not see anything. In that case, we must be wary. They must be moving to the Valor Forest, where they are gathering their strength. That's where the spawn point must be. I still don't understand why you think this town is going to be attacked. Menu furrowed his brows and scratched his head. Replied in a hushed but furious voice. You idiot. The monsters increased as a reaction to the sudden appearance of human armies. And the monsters don't understand that their war is done. If they are to target a place, then it will be the closest place with a lot of people, which is this town. While he did not say it out loud, it was clear that this was a serious and urgent problem. Menu finally understood, and thought about it for a while. Back then, how many people were on the battlefield, including both armies? It would be around 30,000. Indeed. But the Magikagia side were being pushed back due to inferior numbers. I think they had around 10,000. You people were at the battlefield? A horde of monsters that were meant to crush that army. They would not flood into this town. The capacity of Tokyo Dome. But Menu should have been able to see them from the sky. Were they really gathering their forces in the Valor Forest? After the earthquake and all the work he had done, there was no guarantee that they would not move. However, a march would take a lot longer when there were so many of them. Surely there would be no attack today. He thought of reporting to Van. But if this turned into a big incident, it would be more difficult to move. All right. I'll do something about it tomorrow then. You can? Ralph looked at Menu skeptically. Menu nodded. If they are going to come at me with quantity, then I will retaliate with quality. But for that, I need to rest. As soon as Tota returns, if possible. Just then, Tota returned. Sorry. After you left, more adventurers arrived, and I had to treat them. Why are you all looking like that? They explained the matter quietly to Toto, and then the group disbanded for the night, agreeing to meet up again the next morning. Chapter 116, Monster Battle. The next day, Menu and the others gathered together at the Adventurers Guild in order to hold a strategy meeting. While they spoke in hushed voices, they had come to the guild as part of a camouflage. If the guild were to know about the monsters' invasion, then it would cause quite an uproar, and be very troublesome for everyone. As always, Menu wanted to avoid a situation where he attracted attention. If people saw and heard, then he would be more limited with what he could do. Menu understood how too much power could result in jealousy. After all, there was a good example right in front of him. What? Staring at him resulted in a look of suspicion. You are looking very pretty today, Ralph. That earned Menu a loud smack over the head for that. It was only a joke. But Ralph had been shaken by the sight yesterday, and he did not like that Menu was not taking this seriously. First, while the situation is terrible, the conditions are great. As no people are in the area, we can do anything. However, I do not want to waste all of the work I did yesterday, Menu said with a serious expression, as they all surrounded the map. He was more concerned about the farmlands he worked on yesterday, then a horde of 50,000 monsters. Mofusen stroked his beard and muttered, Menu. Would you trust me, and fight in the Hahinoff Plains? Obviously, Mofusen had knowledge about the lands here. Still, if it turned into a battlefield, it would just undo all of his hard work. Menu crossed his arms. You have some idea then? If it goes well, it will improve your work even more, Mofusen said as if he was half sure about it. Menu hesitated for only a moment, and then he nodded. All right then. Today, we will defeat those monsters. Let's go, he said quietly. They then left the crowded building and leisurely made their way towards the Hahinoff Plains. On the way, Menu told the others of his plan. Ralph shook his head, Toto looked excited, and Seti chuckled. Mofusen stroked his beard and laughed. As for the summoned beasts, it was rather predictable for them, and so they stayed silent. What was considered normal was very different between monsters, humans and divine beasts. When they arrived at the plains, there was not a single human or monster there, an endless wilderness of barren soil. Just in case, he linked with Stan and viewed the area from high above. But there was still nothing. First, we have to lure them out. Menu took out his sketchbook and summoned the same eyeballs he had used yesterday. And then he unleashed them into the forest. The monsters would be in a murderous frenzy, and so if something unknown entered the area, their instincts should make them follow it, As for Menu, he did not even look at this as a battle with monsters. He barely even took note of them outside of thinking that there was a lot to deal with. He would not face them head-on or hold back in any way. Yesterday, he realized something while listening to Ralph. Monsters were like a natural phenomenon. Menu and the others ate meat as if it was the most normal thing. Monsters and animals. They were of nature. When eating from street stalls, he often was not even sure what meat he was consuming. But he ate it anyway. He paid and he ate. Hunt, buy, take, eat. And he was grateful. It helped to keep him alive. Food was delicious, and he had learned to savor it. To put it simply, this was like weeding an overgrown garden. Was that war? No, it was just work. As for Menu, he did not like to fight against humans. But since these were not humans, he was not going to hold back like he usually did. This was a clear threat. And he would be rid of it. All right, everyone. Handle the ones that spill through, Menu said, and then the others nodded and scattered across the field. Damagaga, Phallus, Torim, I summon you, Menu said, and then 3 giant balls appeared. The spheres had the earth, wind and fire properties, and were about 10 meters in diameter. And from them, the beasts emerged. The mass and energy caused the wind to blow. The plowed ground sank heavily, and the ground shook as they walked. Menu looked up at these reliable friends and said, "You can go all out today." While not quite a party, they were usually quite bored, as their master did everything. And so this was good news for them. Eventually, they heard a rumbling as the monster horde began to emerge from the forest. Chapter 117, How to Raise the Land. The summoned beasts made use of their giant bodies in order to fight the monster horde. Damagaga used its tongue to kill, Phallus used wind pressure to crush, and Torim used fiery legs to burn everything down. However, as they were so big, there were many monsters that escaped their eyes. And it was the job of Menu and the others to deal with them. Anti-army barrier. Wall. Mofusen created a semi-transparent wall around a vast area, and Stan flew in the sky and glared. Ralph, Seti, and Toto, who rode on an enlarged cannon, then ran around and cut the monsters down. As for Menu, he was doodling. In the first place, while it was a horde of monsters, it was not a huge army. Monsters that start stampedes merely had an instinct to attack groups of humans. There was no order or chain of command. And since they had increased in number so rapidly, they were weak as individuals. Indeed, it would still be a disaster if they reached any of the towns. It was not hard to imagine how many people would die, or what the lasting damage would be. However, that was only if they reached the town. Unfortunately for them, Menu was here, and his picture was now finished. Thorns blooming across the vast land, a mountain of countless stakes piercing the heavens. The art would be erased, and the monsters returned to crystals anyway. And so Menu had drawn something ridiculous. The idea had come from Vlad the Impaler. Of course, Menu did not want to hit his summoned beasts or allies. And so after raising his head from his sketchbook, he swiftly defined the boundary and then summoned it. Summon. From the ground behind the horde, numerous sharp stakes emerged from the ground. Without even having enough time to scream, a great number of the monsters were turned into crystals. The monsters froze. They turned their heads after noticing the sudden loss of their numbers. And by instinct, they looked at the person who was responsible. Menu did not ask, "Want more? Or want to run?" It was pointless to ask, since he would defeat all of them anyway. While the monsters were stunned, the summoned beasts continued to attack. There were fewer than 10,000 at this point. And then Menu joined in the attack. He traded his brush for his staff, and then fought as if it was a sword. He avoided magic, so that he would not hit the others. The battle was waged for less than an hour. The wide area attacks of the summoned beasts were powerful, and things were cleaned up quickly. Before they knew it, the land was covered in trampled crystals. And the only one standing was Menu and company. After they had done their work, Menu dismissed the beasts. Good work, everyone. I'm glad that we were able to get through it safely. If you can do such wide area attacks, then you should just do everything by yourself from the beginning, Seti said angrily, and Menu scratched his head. No, but there are too many. Considering the possibility of some of them escaping, this was the best way. After all, whether it's just 1 or 50,000, their purpose was to attack humans. even a low-rank monster would still head to the town. And so they had to be utterly and wholly obliterated. By the way, what should we do with the ground? Is the magic energy still remaining? Yes. Menu obeyed Mofusen's order and put both hands on the ground. The crystals were scattered all over the plains. As he was thinking about how tiresome it would be to gather them all, Mofusen told him to use heal on the ground. And so Menu cast heal so that it would cover all of the ravaged ground. Do you know how the crystals are processed? No, neither do I. While crystals look hard, there are several parts that are brittle. Over time, the monster seed is made inside of the crystal, and once it becomes sentient, it gathers energy from outside in order to turn into a monster. And so you must process them before the seed is made. Or kill the monster while it is still a seed, and separate the hard part from the brittle part. That way, you can use crystals as a mass of energy. Now, if Menu were to cast heal over so many, Mofusen chuckled while stroking his beard. I see. So that's what happens. Ralph crossed his arms as he watched. Even for Menu, it was impossible to cast heal on the entire area. However, he cast it over as wide an area as he could. And then in reply, the crystal started a chain reaction. The land was healed, and the plants of seeds you could not see were revived. And they began to sprout with life. And just like that, green spread across the plains. Whoa, that is amazing. Menu continued to cast heal, but he was also taken in by the sight. Eventually, Menu felt that the land had regained its life, and he stopped using heal. Up until a moment ago, they were taking away life, but it was nice to transform it into something that was not a threat. He stood up and gazed at the carpet of green. Ho ho ho. It was done perfectly. Mofusen smiled with satisfaction. This must be why he insisted on fighting in the plains. Mofusen, did you know about the crystals? Because they work similar to barriers. That's right. Well, we don't need to talk about the details. Still, there might be some crystals that weren't affected. We should search for them tomorrow. Huh? But the area is so big. Surely it's impossible. If those crystals were left, they could create new monsters. But surely that work could be left to other people? The others were not amused. No, it's fine. We just need to get some personnel from the guild to help. And then it will be over quickly. Quickly? Toto looked at the vast land and muttered in disbelief. Chapter 118. Unfulfilled Dream. We finished. Menu made the report at the Adventurers Guild with a tired expression. The guild master looked surprised, and after blinking with wide eyes for a moment, closed his mouth again. Which one? All of them. It was so tiring. Yesterday, after defeating the monsters, he had returned to the hospital. People from the medical guild were now there, and they helped the former patients, low-ranking adventurers, to bathe in order to get rid of the smell. He had talked to the people there and told them about the monsters, and how they needed help now. The people were happy to cooperate. Especially since the work would be good for rehabilitation. Thanks to that, over 1,000 people helped to gather the crystals across the Hahinov plains. However, Menu and the others had to help as well. And the work, which involved crouching low and searching through the grass, was tiring in a way that was much different from fighting and traveling. All of them? Wait a moment. Can I sit on this couch? Do as you wish. Hey, someone! Guildmaster Van shouted as he left the room. And so Menu collapsed on the couch. Menu and the others had done this work on the condition that they would be allowed to enter the sealed dungeon. The guild knew who they were, and so they could not lie about the quests. That would likely result in some kind of punishment, but while they would hardly lie, it was still necessary to confirm it. The guildmaster was likely sending people to the medical guild and the Hahinov plains at this very moment. It would take at least an hour by horse. And so Menu and the others decided to rest in the meantime. While Menu and Toto were quick to collapse, Ralph and Mofusen were relatively lively. After all, they were used to training and farm work. Even Seti was fine. You two have no energy at all. How ridiculous. When I'm forced to do routine or monotonous work, I get a headache and the urge to run away. It was tiring just trying to bear that. I have no strength to begin with. Toto was used to gathering herbs for hours, but searching through weeds must have been very boring. The exhaustion was all over his face. Well, I used to train by digging holes and then burying them again. It makes you very patient. Stop that. Just the thought of it makes me want to puke. With farming, you are dealing with plants and animals. The key is to enjoy the small changes. That's not too bad. I did everything back in the day. So easy. Manual labor is nothing. By the way, why are you going around to dungeons now? Menu asked. Seti laughed and explained it to him. Well, I guess I could tell you people. I was raised in a dungeon. Huh? I don't even know where I was born. However, I was abandoned in a dungeon right after. It must have been a dungeon that was not managed by the guild at that time. And the strongest monster. Divine beast? Spirit? Whatever. The creature raised me. Well, I am human. And was eventually brought up in a human village. So my memories are vague. As a bird could not teach a human to fly, the monster could not teach Seti to be human. And so once she could stand on 2 feet, she was placed in the care of humans in order to learn how to talk. And there, I had to work hard in order to survive. Oh, it wasn't bad. The villagers raised me as if I were their own. But my real parents. The one who protected me when I couldn't protect myself. That is the dungeon monster. And so I want to find that dungeon, and repay the debt. So that's why Seti goes dungeon crawling, Menu said. Exactly, Seti said with a laugh. She had probably never told this to anyone else. In this world, people hated anything outside of the norm. Even if a child or an infant. So it was something that Menu understood well. It's possible that the guild still does not manage the dungeon. Or maybe they do. It is an unfulfilled dream of mine. It was clear that she had no intention of giving up. Menu was about to say something, when the door opened. What magic did you use? Van looked scary. Menu raised his hands as if in surrender. He was about to explain, but Van put up his hand to stop him. Never mind that. If I ask, it will make us look like fools. For the past month, it was better to just think of it as a strange mystery then. It had seemed hopeless. Work that would never end. And yet, they had no choice but to try. And so they did, desperately. And yet now, all 3 problems were solved as if they had never been there. These adventurers were not even A rank yet. And A rank adventurers would not have finished the job so well. After all, this work required a different set of skills. Well, I suppose it will be fine if it's you people. Processing the aftermath could be troublesome. And he dreaded the reports he would have to write. But he still must keep his promise. Sending people to their deaths was regrettable. But a promise was a promise. Besides, they did not look like they would die. You. In black. I'm Menu. Yes, that's right, Menu. I give you all permission to enter Capriccio. Please come back alive. Yes, we did it. I'll have a boat prepared. Departure will be in 3 days. Prepare with care. The guild master then pushed out the excited party from his office. And then he faced his desk in order to write as vague a report as possible.